Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Wallingford Planning and Zoning Commission to order. This is our March 11th, 2020 meeting. If we'd all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And at this point in time, I'd like to introduce the members of the commission and staff that are here this evening. To my far right is Jamie Hine, who's an alternate on the commission. Next to Jamie is Jeff Cohan, a commission member. And to my immediate right is James Fitzsimmons, also a commission member. To my immediate left, Rocco Matarazzo, who is our secretary. And next to Rocco is Steve Allenson, who's a alternate on the commission. At the table to my left is Cheryl Tubby, who is our recording secretary. Next to Cheryl is Amy Torrey, who is our zoning enforcement officer, as well as our land use specialist. And next to Amy is Tom Talbot. Tom is filling in this evening and for subsequent meetings for Casey Han, who is our town planner. Casey is out on maternity leave. Just a little background on Mr. Talbot. Back in the 90s, Mr. Talbot was an assistant town planner here in Wallingford, and then he was also a deputy director in the planning office for the city of New Haven. So with that, I'd welcome Mr. Talbot to our meetings. And again, he will be he has been, if you would, hired by the town on a temporary part-time basis, so we'll be filling in for Mrs. Han. With that, I proceed with our next order of business, with his approval of minutes. I'd like to call for a motion to approve the minutes of our workshop meeting of February 4th, 2020, provided there's no additions, corrections to the minutes. So with that, I'd entertain either any additions or corrections. If not, a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the minutes as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Cohan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Moving on. Next is I'd call for a motion to approve the minutes of our February 10th, 2020 regular planning and zoning meeting. Again, provided there's no additions or corrections. Hearing none, again, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the commission to approve the minutes of the February 10th, 2020 meeting as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Cohan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? And just, I forgot when I was introducing everybody, I'm Jim Seither, and I'm the chairperson of the commission. Before we go to our first order of business, our public hearings, I'd like to make an announcement as far as what items are not going to be heard this evening. Item number 2, which is a zoning text amendment for a housing opportunity district for DiMartino and Colony Realty LLC. The applicant has requested that the application be continued to our next meeting, so that will not be heard this evening. And the next item that will not be heard is number 3, old business. It's for a site plan for Old Colony Associates LLC, 1268 Old Colony Road. That application has been withdrawn by the applicant. So that brings us to our first order of business, which is a public hearing. It's a special permit, traffic generator, warehouse and distribution center, J. Dewey, on behalf of BL Companies, 225 and 528 South Cherry Street. Will the applicant and or his representative please come forward to begin preparing for the presentation? And while they're doing that, Mr. Matarazzo, if you please note all correspondence for the record.
Mr. Chairman, we have a legal notice 414-19 special permit traffic generator for J. Dewey on behalf of the BL Companies for a warehouse distribution center at 425 South Cherry Street with associated additional van parking at 425 South Cherry Street and 528 South Cherry Street, Alnex. Mr. Chairman, we have correspondence dated December 31st, 2019. To Jeffrey Dewey from Casey Hand Town Planner. We have a memo to Planning and Zoning Commission from Department of Engineering dated January 2nd, 2020. We have a memo to Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission from Allison Kapuscinski, Town Engineer, and dated January 7th, 2020. We have correspondence dated January 2nd, 2020, Casey Hand Town Planner from Jeffrey Dewey, Senior Engineer. We have correspondence dated January 3rd, 2020, to Casey Hand Town Planner from Jonathan DeTautum, Staff Engineer, B&L Companies. This is a summary of drainage system revisions dated December 4th, 2019. We have correspondence dated January 7th, 2020, to Allison M. Kapuscinski, Town Engineer. From Jeffrey Dewey, Senior Engineer. Correspondence dated January 7th, 2020, to Casey Hand Town Planner. This is a let's see. It's a site plan booklet dated December 6, 2019, referencing from to Kevin Hickson, B&L Companies. Big pile. Might be here a little bit. Interdepartmental referral dated November 7th, 2019, signed by the Fire Marshal. We have a memorandum to Casey Hand Town Planner from Aaron O'Hare, Environmental Planner, dated January 24th, 2020. We have a memo to Planning and Zoning Commission from Department of Engineering, dated January 28th, 2020. Correspondence to James Seichter, Chairman, Planning and Zoning, dated February 7th, 2020. Interdepartmental referral dated November 7th, 2019, signed by the Fire Marshal. Application for special permit dated February 19th, 2020. Dated February 11th, 2020. I'm sorry, received February 19th, 2020. Correspondence dated February 19th, 2020 to Mr. Kermit Hua. Correspondence to Vera A. Morrison. Nope, I don't have H. Nope. All right, back it up. Got what do we call this? Just Amazon Logistics. Correspondence to Amazon Logistics. Dated, no date. You want me to do K again? This is architectural engineering and environmental land surveying dated February 19th, 2020. Interoffice memorandum to Casey Hand Town Planner from Eric Kruger, Senior Engineer, dated December 4th, 2019. And K. Correspondence to Vera A. Morrison, Town Clerk, Hamden, Connecticut, dated January 13th, 2020. Correspondence to J. Stacy Yarborough, Town Clerk, North Haven, Connecticut, dated December 12th, 2019. Interdepartmental referral, dated November 13th, 2019, signed by the Fire Marshal. Executive summary, dated February 20th, 2020. Correspondence, summary of drainage systems revision, dated January 23rd, 2020. A packet of site operations and maintenance plan, dated February 20th, 2020. A checklist, no date. At the bottom, revised January 8th, 2019. Correspondence to Casey Hand, Town Planner, dated February 19th, 2020, signed by Christopher D. Gagnon, P.E. A set of plans dated February 19th, 2020. An additional set of plans dated February 19th, 2020. Additional set of plans dated February 20th, 2020. Additional set of plans, revision dated February 20th, 2020. Correspondence to Jeff Dewey, BL Companies from Department of Engineering, dated February 28th, 2020. Inter-office memorandum to Casey Hand, Town Planner, from Eric Kruger, Senior Engineer, dated January 10th, 2020. Going back to 414-19T, correspondence, permeability calculations dated 12/2/2019. Inter-office memorandum to Casey Hand, Town Planner, from Eric Kruger, Senior Engineer, dated January 10th, 2020. Amazon Logistics, again, no date. Correspondence to Casey Hand, from Casey Hand to Jeffrey Dewey, dated February 27th, 2020. Correspondence to Jeffrey Dewey, P.E., B&L Companies, dated February 27th, 2020. And we've got some packet, proposed development, dated, let's see a date on here. Correspondence dated February 28th, 2020, to Eric Kruger, Senior Engineer. We've got more correspondence from Jeffrey Dewey to Casey Hand, Town Planner, dated February 28th, 2020. We've got correspondence referencing Amazon Logistics. Date. We've got correspondence from Jeffrey Dewey to Eric Kruger, Senior Engineer, dated March 5th, 2020. We've got plan revision list summary and dated March 5th, 2020. Same time? Yeah. I think this is part of double D. Same thing. Oh, this whole thing is part of double D. Yeah. You want to read any of this into it, or just? We've got a traffic study dated March 5th, 2020. Traffic study addendum 1 dated March 5th, 2020. And a revised set of plans dated March 5th, 2020. And we've got correspondence to Casey Hand, Town Planner, from Eric Kruger, dated March 5th, 2020. I believe that's it. Nope. I got it. We've got interdepartmental referral dated November 7th, 2019, signed by the environmental planner. We've got correspondence dated March 6th, 2020 from to Robert Baltermitis. Correspondence dated January 10th, 2020 to Robert Baltermitis, PE. Interdepartmental referral dated November 7th, 2019, signed by Fire Marshal. Correspondence from Michael Dion to Casey Hand, Town Planner, dated March 10th, 2020. Correspondence to Casey Hand, Town Planner, dated March 10th, 2020. Correspondence from Casey Hand, Town Planner, to A. Kapushki. I'm butchering that, sorry. Dated March 10th, 2020. Double L was the last one, right?
Thank you, Mr. Matarazzo. Before I ask you gentlemen to begin your presentation, we did, and I'm not sure if you folks received some additional attachments, because the commission just received them this evening. And you know, Mr. Talbot, if these have been the ones that were presented to us this evening, if those had been given to the applicant? Thinking that you probably have not. These are the final, it's probably the final 6 that were read, noted to the record by Mr. Matarazzo. So if you, I'll give you this. Thank you. And before you I would ask our peer review or traffic peer review. Mr. Kermit Hua, if you would please just take a seat at the lower table there, and again, as we go on, we can have you give some presentation. But again, at this point in time, I'd ask the applicant and or his representative to introduce themselves and begin their presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, staff, and people who are attending. My name is Brian Smith, and I'm an attorney at Robinson & Co. in Hartford, Connecticut, and we are here representing the user of the facility, the intended user, Amazon. And we have, as you can see, been working very hard over months to perfect this application. And tonight we're going to have a presentation by 4 of us. I will start, and then that will be followed by Jeffrey Dewey, who will give you the site plan and how we're going to upgrade the existing facility at 425 South Cherry Street, and how we're going to intend to utilize 528 South Cherry Street. We're also going to have Mark DeBourbon from Amazon is going to explain the logistics and how the operations will be conducted, and Michael Dion of PL Companies, who is our traffic engineer, to explain how this will all work. We think that by way of background, this application was submitted to you and to the Wetlands Commission at the same time on October 29th of 2019, thus quite a bit of correspondence that your secretary had to read through. And we are happy to say that on January 15th of 2020, the Wetlands Commission granted us our wetland permit. So we are now here before you to give you our presentation about how we're going to, as I say, upgrade this facility, this existing building. So one of the things that we'll be addressing that I just want to mention is that the existing building, because it is an existing building, has 3 nonconformities that we had to address. And those are under your regulations, section 5.1.c, is a required front yard of 50 feet from any front yard. And this facility, unfortunately, is on 3 streets, so you have, under your regulations, it's all 3 are front yards. So we don't meet those. That's one nonconformity that we'll address in a minute. The second is the sort of a corollary to this. The zoning regulations is 6.14.c.2 requires front landscape area equal to half of the front yard requirement or 25-foot wide landscape strip along all frontages. So we don't meet that, so we have a solution for that is provided for in your regulations, and we'll demonstrate how we do that. And then finally, section 6.14c.2 is a required front landscape area at the building of a 5-foot wide minimum. And again, for a variety of reasons, some of that we don't meet. And we have, as your regulations provide, we have another way to solve that. And Mr. Dewey is going to show you the layout. He'll come up first. He has the boards. So, and this will give me an opportunity to read what you handed to me in the meantime. So thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Jeff Dewey. I'm an engineer at BL Companies, and I will go through the site design for you this evening. Before I get into the actual site on the board before you, I just wanted to point out this application does have 2 addresses associated with it. We have the 425 South Cherry, which is the existing warehouse that has been sitting vacant for some time. And we are also leasing a parcel from the Allnex company for some additional parking, staging, and what have you. And we'll explain more about this as we move through the presentation. I just wanted to make that clear so everybody knew the orientation. So the existing site, as you can see, to the north is Ball Street. To the east, South Cherry Street. To the west is Pent Road. Farther to the west is the landfill area. And the Allnex site is to the south, down South Cherry Street. There's an existing 83,750 square foot warehouse on the facility. And as you can see, there's a lot of paved area immediately around the existing structure. You can't really see, and I apologize, on this exhibit plan, but the 50-foot line would be approximately this distance here, and as you can see, it gets really tight here and over in this corner. So the existing structure does not meet the 50-foot front yard setback. To the rear of the parcel, there is an existing gravel lot that was rented for some time that has since been, that whole leasing and rental has been exterminated. There are, in the back, there's been a series of stockpiles that the Public Works Department has been using to stockpile miscellaneous material, as the owner agreed to allow Public Works to do so, which in the recent time, Public Works has been in and removing their stockpiles. This, at one point, this was all an outwash. A lot of sands and gravels were in there. The sands and gravels, for the most part, have been removed down to a depth of around 8 to 10 feet, with various spoils from various construction sites around town being replaced back in here. There's currently very limited drainage on the site. There's some catch basins along South Cherry Street. They're all dry well catch basins, which, in case you don't know what a dry well is, it means there's no piped outlet. It just infiltrates into the ground, which makes sense for very sandy soil. There's a series of catch basins over on Pent Road, which discharge down along Pent Road heading towards the landfill. There's a small discharge that way that eventually drains to the river. Up on Ball Street, there is no formal drainage. So our proposal is basically, on the exterior of the building, is to keep it predominantly the same. What we're trying to do here is provide a delivery station that has basically 3 different types of access and egress. We have basic employees that work inside the building. We have a trucking component for delivering materials, and then we have a delivery system for delivering the materials around town. So basically what we try to do is to keep these 3 components separate so they don't intermix on the site as much as possible. We are moving, currently there are loading docks all along the west side, the north side, and the east side, various loading docks. So for this site, we're going to move the loading docks to the rear of the south wall. We have 8 bays. Then we also have a bank of parking and a small bank of parking up here that'll be for the employees for the most part, and some for drivers. And then the delivery van staging towards the rear. In the front of the building, or on the north side, is going to be our new front of the building. And this is the reason we have a series of the ADA required parking. And obviously they need to be as close to the building entrance as possible. So one of our difficulties in the site design, which is the natural nonconformity, was not having the 50-foot of frontage. So as that 50-foot started necking down, it didn't give us enough room to put the ADA parking and the required front landscaping strip in there. And I'll get into more detail on that in a minute. I will try to be brief, but there is a few topics that we need to cover here. So basically, the current site situation is about 97% of the site drains towards Pent Road, and only 3 or 4% goes to South Cherry Street. We've redesigned the grading, so all the drainage goes towards the formal Pent Road system, as we realize in talking to the town that there are some minor drainage issues on South Cherry Street, so we decided to keep as much drainage away as we can. We directed all the roof drainage into a subsurface storage and infiltration system. This system is designed to 100% store and infiltrate the water quality volume as recommended by DEP for water quality volume design. All the parking areas, with the exception of the small paved areas in the front up by Ball Street, will go into a separate underground storage infiltration system, and again it's designed to store and infiltrate 100% of the design water quality. Overall, with the drainage system design that we have, including this area here will drain right out into the road, which is a small area because currently this whole paved area drains out into the road. This small accessway with the parking will be piped and connected into the town system with a Vortechnics device to provide water quality treatment before it's discharged into the town system. In general, overall with the stormwater design, there will be between a 10 and a 75% decrease in the peak rate of runoff from the site. And that's for between the 2 and 100-year storms. So we're talking about an average of about a 50% decrease in runoff with the stormwater system as it's designed. And reason being for that is we realize that there are some drainage issues in this area. As far as the signage goes for the site, we do realize that signage is not part of this application. We have shown signage in the plans and we have details for the signs. It's more for informational reasons. It's not for part of this permit application. As far as going through the permitting process, we have been through the staff comments with the police had no comments. Electric had us revert our main feed to a different pole and assure that we have no new poles going in, as that's a moratorium with the town. The fire marshal comments we have resolved by putting in a department connection next to the hydrant. Water and sewer, we've received approval from Eric Kruger via email, and the town engineer. We have resolved all her comments. She's looking for some additional revised drain calcs, which we haven't provided to date, to just see if there was going to be any changes in the plan this evening. So we didn't want to revise the calcs multiple times, but she is in agreement with the project for the most part, but had a few conditions that she'd like us to provide some additional information, which we are happy to do so. She'd like us to relocate a 3-foot landscape strip to the rear, which we are comfortable with doing. So in general, we agree with all the town engineer's conditions. As part of getting this project to this point, has been interesting with the 3 nonconformities. We basically have the existing building is within the front yard setback. That's an existing non-conforming condition that can't be changed. We have the front landscape strip, and as I mentioned, we do need to have the ADA park in here, so there's no physical way to get our front landscape strip in completely. And the third one is the 5-foot landscape strip along the building. So basically, in working with Casey, what we have come up with is we originally had parking all the way down to here and all the way over to here with the ADA park in here. And so we've worked out basically a way of looking at a landscaping deficit. So in getting there, this is the basic regulations. So the total required interior landscaped area, which would be here as per the regulations, is 2,240 square feet. The total required perimeter, which is basically just the back line, is 1,330, with a total front landscaped area, which is that 25-foot landscape strip requirement, would be 68,810. With the current site plan, what we have is the total perimeter, 1,400, total interior, 10,983, which is in this area, which is very much exceeds the 2,240, and the total provided front landscape strip, which includes areas beyond the 25 feet, as you can see in green. So we're well above the required 68,810 with 83,000, which so a total landscaped area of 95,716 square feet versus the required 72,380. So what we've done is we've added additional landscaping over and above to make up for our site nonconformities. In the process of working this out with Casey Hand, she was in agreement with our approach to actually meet the regulation. We calculated what our technical deficit was by having the roadways within that initial 25 feet, versus what additional landscape we're providing within that 25 feet, and it's more than twice, which if the commission is so interested, I can certainly go through those calculations with you. I have them with me tonight, and we can discuss that further. Outside of landscaping, which was one of the toughest parts of the design, and the stormwater, making the stormwater meet the requirements of the town engineer, which we have met. That ends my presentation, so I don't know if we want to entertain questions at the moment, Brian, or wait till the end, or however the commission feels.
Mr. Chairman, we have the presentation ready, but if you'd like to ask questions.
Well, I think we'll see if commission, I know you've talked about the first site. Are you going to discuss the second site, the Olenex, where you're leasing that, or?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So basically, the All Next property is we're leasing roughly 3.3 acres. We are only proposing striping and a small section of curbing to block an existing entrance because we want to control. We do not want the center in and out. We want to just have it on each end for better control, better safety of the area. As far as drainage, there's 3 catch basins in the back. The whole site pitches west, and it discharges to a head wall somewhere in this woods area. We couldn't get to it because this area was fenced. Olnex has a pretty in-depth security, so we'd have to go through some classes and so forth for security to be able to get into that area. We deemed, since we're not doing any changes to the drainage system, we deemed that it wasn't really important to go see the drainage. I'm sure it drains west. Whether it gets into the town system or just flows overland to the river, I couldn't really tell you. And actually, if the ground is still natural conditions, it probably soaks in the ground because with the natural sands in the area, it probably infiltrates.
At this point in time, any commission members with any questions for the applicant on so far his presentation? Mr. Allenson.
Just one quick question. Looking at the map on the corner of Penn and Ball Street, if you flip back to, so on the corner, pretty much on Ball Street, it looks like there's no proposed plantings on that part of the corner, but there's plantings on the Penn side. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct. This area, we're proposing building an island within the town right-of-way, which still maintains pavement width. That's the standard for the town road. And the reason for this being is that currently the existing site conditions, this is all paved all the way through here. So to add landscaping and provide a driveway, we are actually building a landscaped island within town property, but we're not allowed to plant trees or anything like that in accordance with the regs on the town property.
Okay, so maybe I misread the map, because it looks like there's trees planted on the Penn side of that strip, but not on the Ball side of the strip.
Correct. On the Penn side of the strip, this is our client's property that we own, and on the outside is the town's properties. That heavy line represents the property line. So there's a little bit of both, but once we get up to the Ball Street side, the entire island is within town property.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other commission members with questions? I just have one. When you were talking about the Allnex property, you had mentioned there's going to be 2 access points. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
In your traffic study, it said it's only going to have 1.
Well, we can address that when we get towards the traffic portion of our presentation.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify it, because again, in the traffic study, it said there'd just be 1 access, main access point. Again, you had mentioned there'd be 2.
All right, we'll make sure that we handle that when we get to that. Thank you.
If there's no other questions from commission members at this point, I'd ask the applicant to continue with his presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we would like to do next is have the Mr. Mark DeBourbon explain how the operations will be conducted, because we know that there is considerable interest in how the operations are actually conducted on site. So, Mr. DeBourbon.
Members of the Planning and Zoning Commission,
So I'm just get it closer to it.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now, please? Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Again, my name is Mark DeBourbon. I'm with Amazon Logistics based out of Seattle. My home is in California. Travel all over the country talking to jurisdictions and talking about Amazon Logistics and what kind of business we are. If I may be so bold, I'd like to use Mrs. Tubby as my example of an Amazon customer. And I'll use a hypothetical. Mrs. Tubby would order a toaster from Amazon. She would go online, order this toaster. The toaster would come from an Amazon fulfillment center. You may have seen Amazon fulfillment as somewhere between $1.5 million to a 3 million square foot facility. I believe there's one north of Bradley Airport, and we have other ones in Connecticut as well. That toaster comes out of that warehouse where a host of products are held. That product would come then to a sortation center where it is carved up and determined the most effective, efficient way that that toaster could get to Mrs. Tubby's house. If it's determined that Amazon Logistics, our business, could get that to her as most cost effectively and as quickly as possible, it would be routed on a 53-foot line haul semi-truck on an overnight delivery to this, what we call, last mile facility on Cherry Street. The package for Mrs. Tubby's house and other packages are unloaded between, I'm estimating that 8 to 10 line haul trucks would come in on an overnight basis between the hours of, let's say, 10:30 at night to 8:30 in the morning. Those trucks are unloaded under the roof from our dock doors, and the packages are sorted and based on zip codes aligned on baker's racks. Think of a 5.5-foot baker's rack. There's no racking in the warehouse. They are sorted by zip codes and sorted throughout the evening, scanned into the system, or scanned into our computers, and aligned and packaged and sectioned off under the roof at the warehouse. Again, like I said, based on zip codes, to be delivered out in the morning to the constituents of Wallingford. Once the unloading and the sortation, if you will, occurs overnight, those sortation associates would then go home. We have estimated about 125 of those sortation associates on an overnight shift to unload and sort those packages. Those sortation associates would go home. We organize and clean up the warehouse, clean up the break rooms, things like that that have been used, and a series of what we call our third-party delivery drivers start entering or coming over to the premises. Those drivers enter, I'm going to roughly say around 9 a.m. in the morning. Safety is paramount to Amazon. We have stand-up meetings for those DSP drivers, talk about issues and concerns. We always have a safety tip and address concerns that may have come up, and just basically have a stand-up half-an-hour meeting emphasizing safety on the road for our drivers. The first wave of vans coming into the delivery station, and I don't know if maybe I can walk over, or you can see there under the roof, or maybe I could have Jeff, if he would step
Why don't you have
up.
someone walk over there if you would, please?
I'm sorry?
I said if you'd have someone walk over there, please, just
Absolutely, sir.
Good, thank you.
Jeff, if you could point to where the first wave of DSP vans are parked, if you will, that'll be loaded in the first wave of vans to go out. So those are the first waves that you're talking about that are pre-stationed overnight. Those vans go out. We have 35 vans in that queuing section starting at 10 a.m. in the morning. That first wave of 35 vans would be released onto the town of Wallingford. Right behind that wave, we have a queuing section. That queuing section then moves into the loading section. They're loaded up in half-hour increments. At 10:30, that group of 35 would leave. So when we talk about a overall capacity of 130 vans in the entire network in this supporting the station, not all 130 would be released onto the town of Wallingford at once. They go out in waves of 25. They go out in waves of 25 onto the streets until around 1 p.m. in the afternoon. So we go from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., avoiding the morning peak hours. Those drivers go out for an 8 to 10 hour shift throughout the town of Wallingford and the surrounding area. They come back in generally the same waves as they were released. So if the first 25 went out at 10 a.m., logically thinking first out, first back. Now there may be a little overlap here or there, one or two vans finishing a route early that may be left at 10:30 or 11, but primarily we look at it in our modeling is that first out, first back. In between the last van leaving at 1 o'clock, we also have something called Amazon Flex. These are our what we call our personal vehicles, our personal dispatch folks that can set up an appointment through an application base through their telephone to set up a time between 4 and 6 p.m. to come deliver packages for us. We think it's great for the stay-at-home parent, the college student, someone earning a secondary or tertiary income. The flex drivers come between 4 and 6. Again, set up an appointment. They leave in waves of about 20 minutes. So again, we estimate about, I believe, 100 flex drivers coming to this location. Again, they leave in the waves. Let me just confirm that number when I said 100. It is about 100 traditional passenger vehicles. Think of a Prius. Again, they load up their Prius with packages and they leave in 20-minute increments. Again, going out in waves of, in the math, 2 hours, over 100, 30, 25, maybe every half hour. Those drivers go out. Again, the vans come back. The delivery vans that left in the morning, they come back between the hours of around 6:30 to 9 p.m. Again, first out, first back. They lock their vans, they get in their personal vehicles, and they drive home. We straighten up the station at night and get ready for the next inbound. Wash, rinse, and repeat 7 days a week. In a nutshell, that is our operation. I'm sure you have a host of questions.
Sure. Commission members with questions. Mr. Fitzsimmons.
I thank you very much for that description. I just, as you can see, we have a volume of paper in front of us. So my questions on this application are going to relate to the operations as well as the vehicle traffic and traffic. So we have numerous traffic studies. So I'm looking at one traffic study, which has a table in here, and this one is dated, forgive me, we received it March 5th, okay? So, and this has a chart showing the trip vehicle, and it says trips by. So this is, I'm trying to be focused on what you talked about. So it says trips by, associates managers, then it says DSP, and then flex drivers and trucks. So what you just described was the flex drivers and the DSP. Is that correct? Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, sir. The delivery mechanisms we call delivery service provider. Those are the, what we call them, maybe you've seen them on the road with Amazon branding on them, the Sprinter vans.
Yeah.
They usually park in parking stalls of 11 by 27. Their width is about a 9-foot wide wheelbase with a 24-foot length. Very tall vans. We call those our Sprinter vans, and those are our delivery service provider vans. Yes.
Okay. So those would be the ones that are in the first queue, if I understood correctly
That is
your
correct.
presentation. Okay. The 4 to 6 p.m. interests me, and I want to make sure I understood it. Those are private passenger vehicles.
Yes, sir, they are.
Like the cars in the parking lot at this town hall right now, correct?
Yes, sir.
So but the other ones would be Amazon vehicles with Amazon branding.
Correct.
Okay. So that interests me because that's the 4 to 6. So that's in the afternoon peak.
Yes, sir.
So, and I'll say this candidly, you don't control them. I mean, so if I'm going to be one of these flex drivers, right?
Yes, sir.
I'm using my vehicle. So I'm driving my vehicle to the facility.
Yes, sir.
I'm loading
Amazon package.
Amazon packages. I'm working on behalf of Amazon between 4 and 6.
Yes, sir.
Does that vehicle need to return to the facility, or is it a one-time trip a day?
Amazon has a tremendous delivery rate, first-time delivery rate. If that driver needs to come back, they will, but we are in the very high percentages as far as that delivery. Again, in that time of frame, people are home. We generally route them to individual homes. Where you get stuck is if you deliver to a townhome that may have, or an apartment complex that may have a security code that got changed. If we need to leave something, a package behind somebody's potted plants behind their front doorstep, or we can't get into a certain facility, we make every attempt to deliver that package, but to the extent we can't, they come back.
Okay. going back now to the other drivers, the DSPs.
Yes,
So
sir.
those employees would park their car and then get in a van, right? So the vans stay at the facility when they're not out in delivery, correct?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
If I'm a DSP driver,
Yes, sir. You bring your personal vehicle to the station,
Yeah.
park it, come in for your meeting, come in for your safety stand-up meeting for about half an hour. Once that's concluded, you go back to the parking lot and pick up your van, and we get into the loading, queuing, out into the parking lot, moving those vehicles through the system between loading, loading, queuing, and parking.
I have a lot more questions, but I'll wait for the other traffic discussion.
Yes,
The other questions for you, just to make sure I understand based on your description.
Yes, sir.
This facility is 24 hours, 7 days a week?
It's open 24/7, but the delivery times take place. The primary use is the delivering of packages to your constituents and Amazon customers. The inbound, if you will, and again, the different components of how this product gets delivered, as I mentioned before, from the Amazon Fulfillment Center, the large warehouse where product is stored, to a sortation center where the product is, through algorithms, figured out how do I get it to Mrs. Tubby's house as quickly as cost effectively as I can. If it's determined that it's Amazon Logistics, again, that 53-foot line haul truck comes to the Cherry Street facility. In acronyms, we're calling the station DOB2. The line haul truck comes to DOB2 between 10:30 at night and 8:30 in the morning. We have, in our models for the size of the station, we think 8 line haul trucks come regularly at this station. So they come between those hours, and those trucks are unloaded. Again, the packages are sorted onto baker's racks based on zip codes, and then subsequently loaded onto in the morning, the DSP vans, and then delivered in those waves of 25 out to our customers throughout the town of Wallingford.
And again, looking at the traffic study dated March 5th, it says that the flex drivers will arrive on site during the afternoon, 3 shifts of 25 drivers.
Yes, sir.
So 25 drivers total on the 3 shifts? Is that 75 or 25?
Total number, and I guess now I have not seen that traffic
Okay.
study. In my operational narrative, my 24-hour clock talked about 100 drivers, so an extra 25.
There you go.
So
Okay.
between 75 and 100, I'll say.
Excuse me, just for a second, whoever has their phone, would everybody please turn off their cell phones? I'd appreciate that, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir.
No, sir, that's fine.
So again, because you mentioned you're from Amazon, so the
The
100
number that I have is 100.
is 100. Okay, and it's broken out in the traffic study, 3 shifts of 25 drivers between 4 and 5, and 1 shift of 21 drivers between 5 and 5:20. So again, I think because the preciseness of this traffic study talks about that, that's why I was interested in asking you, because those are private passenger vehicles.
They are private passenger
Yeah.
vehicles, sir. They have been vetted, though, through Amazon. They were background checks,
Yeah.
driving records, things like that. And again, they sign up for the app, and we have their driver's license and information on the drivers and what have you. And they set up an appointment with us to come deliver for us.
Just to be clear, I think I'm very, very familiar with your operation, and your vehicles are at our house frequently. but I think, as I said, my concern is probably the traffic and the trip generation.
Yes, sir.
That's the nature of my questions. But since you took the time to explain the operation, I'm having a better picture of it.
If I could address that just a little bit further to give you some context. We are a 5-year-old business. We started in 2015. When I first started in January of 16, we were 8 delivery stations. Now we're up close to 200, and we're continuing to grow and again expand. We see our customers out there. We think we can deliver the packages better than UPS and the U.S. Postal Service. And then also, in addition, I want to be the end-to-end user or customer or vendor, if you will, to my customers. If UPS or the U.S. Postal Service delays in getting Mrs. Tubby her toaster, all she knows is that Amazon didn't deliver her packages on time. If I do it, then it's my call. I own it A to Z. So we think we're doing it better, and we're trying to grow this network to do that. The historical nature, we were as late as last year had a model where we were starting the dispatch, if you will, of our DSP vehicles around 7 a.m. That was going up until about 9:30 to 10, right in the middle of peak. of the morning commute, the 7 to 9 morning commute. We also saw that in a return 4 to 6. Those drivers would come back right in the middle of the afternoon commute. Two things came out of that. Number one, and I've seen this firsthand as I go around the country talking to various planning and zoning commissions, that they're, and again in traffic studies, very concerned about traffic, very concerned about us interfering with their constituents coming home from work. They've had a long day, or getting to work, coming home. Again, that kind of impact. Number two, we also looked at us being able to deliver packages next day. And we find that when we launch them a little bit later in the morning and our flex drivers a little bit later in the afternoon, we can help get that product to our customers next day, and on occasion, if we can, same day. So moving the shift to the 10 to 1, 6:30 to 9:30 for our primary DSP vans coming back, we think it serves two purposes. Addresses the concerns of any jurisdiction as far as impacting peak traffic, and also getting our packages to our customers in a more timely fashion.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, just one additional question for you.
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Is there a facility like this now in operation in Connecticut?
There is.
In what town?
Bristol.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimmons. Other commission members? Mr. Cohen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow on to Mr. Fitzsimmons' comments about the operation.
Yes, sir.
I'll start with the 53-foot line trucks. How many of those at any given time would you expect to have on site?
On site, well, we have the capacity, and I believe, I'm looking at my site plan properly, I believe we have 6 dock wells or dock doors at the site, so we do have the capacity to take as many as 6
And,
at one time.
is that what you would expect? What would be the normal, arrival rate? And
Again, we're constricted by the size of this facility. I think we're
Right.
about 83,000 square feet facility, so it's not one of our larger facilities, but again, that can vary between traffic, between the outbound, if a driver is late, a semi-driver is late, there's all sorts of different things that can happen. Again, we have the window open between 10:30 at night and 8:30 in the morning when these drivers can come in. Again, our analysis shows we're going to have 8 of a steady state evening come in. As far as directly answering your question, it could just vary. There are windows here. If I pinpointed and said, well, I'll have 1 at 11, 1 at 12, 1 at 1, it might be 2 at 1:30 because they got stuck in traffic or they had a breakdown.
so basically the question is, you're not expecting any of these 53-foot trucks to stack up?
No, sir.
At the site?
Nobody should be queued up in the street.
Okay. That was really my question. So, and then I just wanted to ask about the other operation as far as waves. Now you mentioned that before the drivers go out for the day, you have a meeting to talk about safety,
things like that.
Things like that.
Yes, sir.
Do all the waves show up for that meeting, or do you have a meeting for each of the 3 waves?
We will probably have a series of 2 groups come in. The DSP drivers are third-party delivery for Amazon. They're not direct Amazon employees. We contract with a team, let's say an owner, you and maybe your spouse wants to start a DSP company. You lease 25 or 30 or purchase 25 or 30 vans, you hire those drivers and you contract directly with Amazon to provide that delivery for that. In larger facilities we have 1, but in this one I would estimate that maybe 2 stand-up meetings happen. We'll get the drivers that leave, let's say 10 to maybe 11:30 come in a group, and then the next group comes in. We'll have those 2 stand-up meetings. We don't want people just standing around waiting.
Right. So kind of my real question, I guess, is with the waves, the folks are assigned to a specific wave. I mean, the third wave couldn't come in one day and go out.
Try to go
first
first.
wave,
No, sir,
right?
they do
Okay.
not.
So they are assigned, so they're,
Amazon generally rewards the better companies get first priority, so they'll go out first.
right,
And we say better company, we have metrics that we measure our drivers and our companies with, but generally they're selected. So I would estimate that we would have 6 different DSP companies here, company A, B, C, D, E, and F, right? And I have them at their own separate companies, their own separate drivers, their own separate ownership, their own separate management to get those out. I would bring company A in first, just for alphabetical order. Company A is in the loading zone first to be released at 10 a.m. Once company A leaves, company B comes in from the queuing section, already lined, ready to go, efficiently loading. We're targeting 20 minutes, but it's more like 25 minutes maybe, that they load and cube out their vans. That group, 25, company B goes out the door. Company C has already been in the queue coming in, and so on until we get through our 130 vans every day.
right. Okay, just a couple more quick questions, hopefully.
course.
So you mentioned that operation takes place from 10 to 1 p.m., but, the drivers have 8 to 10 hour shifts. So, if that shift leaving at 1 p.m. is out for 10 hours, I mean, they're delivering quite late at night.
Yes, sir.
Is that, I've never gotten a package, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. I mean, is that?
Usually around 8 o'clock,
Yeah.
8:30 at the latest, maybe is when a package would be delivered, but then we give them time to actually get back to our station.
Oh,
That's why we
okay.
threw in the number around
Got it.
9 o'clock, so when they would arrive back in as the center point or the hub of their return.
Right. And then just my last question is, this is strictly for delivery in Wallingford. It's not for North Haven, Meriden.
I can't say it's strictly for Wallingford. I don't have our heat maps, if you will, of what that distribution looks like. I don't know, maybe it's in the traffic study as far as where our vehicle miles are traveling. I would not say it's strictly for just Wallingford, though.
Okay,
I can add that out.
yeah, because that during the presentation, that was, my impression. I didn't think that was the case, but,
I
okay.
don't believe it is. I don't think we're just limited to the town of Wallingford. I know in other Amazon delivery stations, we do deliver out. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
terribly
okay.
far. I mean, I can't be delivering to Danbury, Connecticut from this station. I
Of
don't do
course.
that. It's too long of a drive time, and it just doesn't work out that way. Which is
Thank
why
you.
we're trying to
Thank you.
open more
Yep.
stations.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Other commission members? Mr. Hunt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just I think a couple quick questions. The numbers that you have given to us, you have 130 DSP vans and then 100 flex vehicles. That would be on a average day, correct?
Mr. Hine, that's called steady state in Amazon, and I'd be happy to get into a what we call our peak season as well. Steady state is our operation that I would say it's 10 and a half months out of the year, maybe 10.8, something like that. The times when we see our volumes spike, if you will, and our orderings that spike. Anybody ever heard of Amazon Prime Day in July? The 2-day window in the middle of July where we have these blowout sales. We will ramp up our operations for a couple of days in July to meet our customer demands. The other time, as you can imagine, is during the holiday season, right after Thanksgiving. We see our volume go up quite a bit at Amazon during the holiday season. I had the good fortune of working with Casey Hand to discuss that, and I've placed that in my operational narrative. I don't know, as you were going through the list of documents, I think there was some confusion about a document that you couldn't quite identify.
We have that one, because I can see that it's
The yellow
it's yellow
highlight.
highlight, yeah. I
And
think
I
we have-
highlighted this yellow in particular as a courtesy to Casey to point out what our peak numbers look like. And I didn't want to use the word cap, but I call it a ceiling, that Casey and I came to a number that during our holiday season and during our prime days in July, if we were to exceed a certain number of trips, we would come back and talk to her and in the planning department and explain why and what it is we needed to help accommodate. Again, open book here, want to make sure that we're not surprising anyone with our operations. But yes, we do see a spike. Now, what that looks like, it's hard to say. If Mr. Fitzsimmons feels very generous next Christmas and wants to order a bunch of Amazon packages, I would like to be delivering to his house more than maybe he did last year. So again, multiply that by hundreds of thousands of Amazon customers. That number does go up during the holiday season.
And I think here, if I'm reading this, the Amazon is agreeing that the delivery vans will not exceed 275.
Yes, sir.
And that's per day?
During the holiday season and in those 2 days, or in those few days of Prime, in July. Yes, sir.
And is that 275 delivery vans, or is that 275 vehicles in total?
Delivery
leaving?
vans.
Okay.
Delivery vans.
So that does not also include the flex
Personal,
drivers?
it does not, sir.
Okay. Is there anywhere, did you make that calculation as to how many flex drivers you would be using during those periods?
We did not. Again, that is sort of a determination that is made as we roll into that season, as we see our volume go up. Again, with those flex vehicles, we don't make that determination at this. We can guess we'll probably stay though pretty much towards the 100 flex drivers. It may go up a bit, but I wasn't able to put in that narrative or that information right now as far as what the flex vehicles would go up.
No, fair enough. And then during your peak season, do you keep the time, the times of delivery or the times that the vans leave the facility the same? I mean, do they still leave in the same waves, or do you extend that period?
Again, making with more volume, again, I'm constrained by how many vans I put in my queuing and in my staging areas. Again, staying within the constraints and the confines of the size of the delivery station, we would extend those times out a little bit further, a little bit earlier, a little bit later. I would say maybe 9 to 2, 1:30 or 2, just a rough estimate. It depends on the ebbs and flows, if you will, and how streamlined we can get the station to run. Again, you are crawling, walking, running, sprinting as the cadence and the flow of the station and the workers and our managers there run the station. So yet to be determined, but yes, we would anticipate expanding those hours out just a little bit more. Much like you see the U.S. Postal Service or UPS delivering late at night during the holiday season.
Okay. And your business is 5 years old, I think you said earlier,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Roughly.
And you now have, how many delivery centers did you start off with, did you say?
Well, when I started, we were 8. In January of 2016, we called them our legacy sites, or at least that's what I call them. Are things that we've learned in the years that I've been there, the real estate that maybe I would have chosen back in January of 2016. Again, we're learning and evolving in this business. We're taking totally different real estate today than we did back in 2016. Freestanding, plenty of parking, plenty of elbow room, enough real estate to cover our peak needs 12 months out of the year, so we're not scrambling in October or November to find off-site parking to handle the peak volume. We want to be self-contained. Think of a shopping center when I was born in Danbury. I think of the Danbury Fair Mall. If you look at the peripheral parking around Danbury Mall, it's empty 11 months out of the year. Go there December 15 and the entire parking lot is full. So again, that we think of it the same way now as one of our learnings. Let's be able to be self-contained and self-supportive and not have to go after additional parking for just that peak season and go through that scramble and upset a community, or even extend our drive times from far away off-site facilities.
Yeah, no, I guess what I'm getting at is you're now up to 200 delivery centers.
Getting close to that, yes, sir.
I think we can all agree that Amazon has been extremely successful. Amazon Logistics has been extremely successful. And the numbers that we have here right now are the numbers that apply today. I would expect that.
Just to this station.
Right.
Just to this station.
Right.
They're
I would expect, or anticipate at least, that the number of trips and the number of vehicles going through this center will likely increase if Amazon remains successful. Am I right on that?
Again, we are constrained by the size of the building. We can only inbound so much. I have facilities in California that have, 40 loading docks that are 500,000 square feet where I can run, 5 times the volume I could out of here. I'll always be constrained by the size of the building. I can only do so much. There's only so much time during the day. The inbound traffic comes in, the size of the parking lot, the size of our operations. As we get more streamlined and more effective, yes, there might be little tweaks here or there, but for the most part, this is steady state. These are the numbers we're going with.
Yeah, and I appreciate your answer. I'm asking the questions because I have you here right now, and I think I'm trying to get my arms around the number of vehicles that are going to be coming in and out of this facility now and in the future.
Yes, sir.
So I appreciate your responses. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Pine. Any other commission members? I had a long list of questions, but I think Mr. Fitzsimmons and certainly Mr. Cohen really addressed
If
all
I
of
may
those.
volunteer one more thing, sir, in dealing
Absolutely.
with Ms. Hand.
I'll phrase it as a question.
Yes,
Phrase
sir.
it as a question.
I'm a big believer in fostering partnerships. I'm a guest in your community, a corporate guest. I foster partnerships. Ms. Hand has my cell phone number. She will have my station manager's number, whoever that may be. If there are issues that arise, I told Casey, please call our station manager and see if you can get any issues, good, bad, or indifferent, resolved. If she does not get satisfaction there, she has my number. I will take care of it in Seattle and try to get her an answer and resolve. I very much view being here in the town of Wallingford as a business relationship partnership with the town of Wallingford, and we look really forward to being here and partnering with the community of Wallingford to be a good corporate citizen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I would like to have Michael Dion go through the traffic studies, of which have been of great interest. So, Michael.
Yes, for the record, my name is Michael Dion. I'm a senior project manager at BL Companies. I am not Fred Greenberg. He sends his hellos. I don't know if that's good for me, good for you, or good for anybody. So looking at the traffic, we talked in length with Mr. DeBourbon about how the cars and vehicles and vans are going to come and leave the site. So you will get a addendum number 2 to the traffic study. It went to Ms. Hand and to Mr. Hua because they had some additional comments. So you will get that at some point. What we found is at the midday peak is when most of the traffic is going to be at the site. We've got some associate managers leaving the site, and we have vans coming and going at the same time. So we found out that there's about 294 total trips during the peak hour midday. That's 222 leaving and 72 coming in. So we wanted to look particularly at that peak hour for the traffic. And what we did is we took traffic counts at intersections around the site, so at Cherry Street and John Street, out to Route 5 down to 91. That's where we feel the majority of the traffic's going to go because none of the delivery vans can go to 15. So working with Mr. Hooer and Ms. Hand, we actually revised the traffic study again to send some of the traffic for the personal vehicles out to Route 15. So when we look at the traffic at the signals, we're going to look at delay for each vehicle. And what we come up with that is you come up with a letter grade, A through F, just like you're in school with A being the best, F being the worst. Generally, level of service D at an intersection is acceptable to the Department of Transportation. So if you looked at the report and the revised one, you'll see that all of the intersections now operate at an acceptable level of service. I particularly like to look at the delay for the traffic signal, and you'll see that there's not a large delay associated with any particular movement on the signals. So when you get the revised report, you can see that, and maybe Mr. Hu, I don't know if Mr. Hu has had a chance to review it or not, but if he has, he can offer comments to that. So we also want to mention that all these traffic signals on Route 5 are state-owned signals, so the state will have a say in anything that happens to them. Due to the size of the site and the number of parking spaces, the Office of State Traffic Administration is going to review this traffic study and review the site. So they will have a say in any of our traffic outcomes and any of the drainage on the site. So if you have any questions, I'll gladly take them.
Sure, I guess the question would be what happens, because I think the state is rather stingy as far as giving up time on, on state roads. What happens if because I think you're looking to have, is it 10 or 12 seconds taken off the green time on Route 5, is that correct?
That was in the addendum number 1. Addendum number 2, where Mr. Hua had suggested we reroute some of the traffic towards the Merritt Parkway instead. That means that made our traffic signals work much better at that intersection, so it doesn't need any improvements at all. The queues dropped down to 200 feet approximately, so that's about 8 vehicles.
So there's just so I'm clear, there's no taking of any green time off of?
There'd be no revisions to the traffic signals proposed.
Okay. Questions? Yes, Mr. Matarazzo.
As to directing the traffic towards 15, how do you control that? Is that by setting up the delivery routes?
There'll be no delivery vans going out that way unless they're delivering to that neighborhood, because the delivery vans won't be allowed on 15. So any of the traffic that we sent that way was personal vehicles, managers leaving that could possibly take the Merritt to and from work, or flex drivers coming to and from the site.
Okay, again, but how are you going to control the direction of the flex drivers?
We can't control. We've made assumptions on how many vehicles we think would be coming from each direction.
So it's a suggestion, an assumption that's
It is an assumption, yes. Used a judgment call.
Off pressure off the.
There's a way to, I think Mr. DeBourbon can address the
Well,
operations.
no, I guess what I wanted to just confirm is that when these flex drivers do come in, and the same thing with our DSP drivers, they're given devices, and with the flex drivers, they have it on their phone. It's device optimization. If I looked at this as the town of Wallingford, I wouldn't have a driver. My delivery station is in the center of this paper. I wouldn't have a driver starting here, or delivering the first package here, second package here, third one here, fourth one there, just all over the place. There's route optimization software that we have built in, both for our DSP drivers. So we want them to operate as efficiently and as quickly as possible.
That's kind of what I was thinking, is that,
yes, sir.
Are you going to be able to?
We will be able to steer them in the most optimized way. And again, avoiding the Merritt Parkway, as none of our, I can't say that for the flex drivers in their personal vehicles or our overnight work support staff and what have you. But as far as the DSP delivery vans, I don't believe they're allowed on the Merritt Parkway.
No, but they're the only ones you're going to be able to more or less manipulate or control by your routing.
DSP drivers and the flex drivers, yes,
And the
sir.
flex drivers as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make sure I heard the traffic engineer to talk about that. We're going to be receiving a second addendum to the traffic study?
Yes, you will.
All right, so we don't have it here, nor do you have it, correct?
I submitted it to Mrs. Hand and Mr. Hua.
Oh. Okay.
It was yesterday, so I don't know if it went anywhere farther.
We have a letter dated March 10th, and but it was signed by from your firm, signed by Jeff Jeffrey Dewey responds to. Is that what you're talking
The
about?
response to those comments. So we responded to those comments and then we revised the study to incorporate those comments.
Gotcha. Okay, so I just want to clear. So
Oh, yes, sorry, yes.
So we don't have addendum 2. We have your response. Is that?
Yes, and
Okay.
I don't know if, I submitted to, I don't know if it went farther than that.
You can see what we have up
I
here.
know,
I
I didn't hear it read into record, so that's why
Okay.
I'm guessing you don't have that yet.
Yeah, and the reason I shared with you, candidly, I went over to the staff table because we were missing page 3 of this letter, and I was looking for your response to our consultant's comments. So I guess, for the record, the reason you're all here tonight is you need a special permit due to the trip generation. So in my opinion, as much as I appreciate the potential use and know the company well and know the area well, it's about the traffic and about the trip generation. So my questions, if you're not ready this evening, that we have everything, it doesn't sound as if you're looking for us to act on this evening. Is that fair, or is that when you said we're going to get something else, I thought, okay, you're not ready. Am I?
No, I submitted it, but I think I don't know if the peer reviewer has had a chance to review it.
Okay.
Well, if I can just
Sure.
interject, whether or not the peer reviewer has a chance, I don't believe the commission has that information, or if it did, we may have received some of it tonight, which really doesn't give us an opportunity, although we do have a peer reviewer here who is going to comment on it, but it really doesn't give the commission, time to review it. So I think if you are, and I think maybe following up on what Mr. Fitzsimmons was saying, I think at this point in time, if you are, or we're anticipating a response or some action by the commission, is I think Mr. Fitzsimmons mentioned, certainly the traffic is an important issue, and the commission needs to have a good understanding of that. But again, with that, I let Mr. Fitzsimmons continue.
No, Mr. Chairman, that's certainly your purview. I was just trying to figure out if we have what we need in front of us this evening. So, if I could, again, to talking about...
Oh, no, go ahead.
If talking about the traffic studies and what we have, as well as our peer review, the reason you're here is obviously all the trip generation. So we have a very thorough understanding of the types of vehicles. So the tractor trailers will be there. That doesn't appear to be the issue because there's 8 of them. It really is the daytime traffic, and the fact is, it appears to me, based upon, and I did my homework, I read all this, it does appear to be the trip generation in the area and the distribution of the vehicles. So even what you said in your comments in the memo you sent yesterday, by reassigning some of the traffic to 15, it certainly helped slightly, but it's still, I think the concern I have is the intersection that the chairman referred to is John Street and Route 5. That bridge is challenging. The area is challenging. It's challenging today without, and it's not fair to you, but this whole application relies on the good use of that intersection. And I say that, probably not the best. I've been there. I've been through the intersection a lot, and I just look at the queuing that happens because of the truck traffic that goes over the John Street Bridge, and most of your study relies on vehicles going over that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes. Okay. And so, similar to what the chairman said, picking up, you have since removed your request or removed the idea of stealing 11 seconds of green time on the light. Do I understand it correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
The traffic study shows that it operates satisfactorily now.
Satisfactory. And again, using your analogy, the grade level, it's E, correct? E is in Edward versus F?
No. At that traffic signal?
Yeah.
No. The Route 5 at John Street and South Orchard, the intersection itself would operate at a B, and there is the John Street approach would operate at a D.
Okay. So, in yesterday's letter, page 3 of 5, the page that was missing that the staff got for us, halfway down the letter it says, and this is, you're quoting our consultant, it says, the John Street approach Route 5 will experience level of service F and a 95th percentile queue of 405 feet. So but I guess because you remove the signal, stealing of the signal time, it changes.
Now, what happened
I don't
is-
understand that. and
Yeah,
that's
so
help me
what
understand
happened
that.
is, that's comment number 2. Comment
Right.
number 3 was he asked us to consider changing some of the trip distribution. And so when we took approximately 25% of the trips and sent them off to the Merritt Parkway, that was 25% less trips going to the John Street light, which improved the operation at that signal. So incorporating comment 3 fixed comment number 2.
Yeah, because your last comment says a retiming will also not be necessary.
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about the trips. What are they? Private passengers or are they your flex vans?
The
What ki-
majority of them heading, during the midday peak, we have the midday peak, there was outbound 97 vans and 125 associates. So the 125 associates is passenger cars, which we split 25% of those off to go to the Merritt Parkway. So the rest are all going to the John Street intersection.
Okay. Yeah, and just make sure, because the chairman and I were discussing, the vans are not allowed on the Merit because they're commercial
Yes.
license plates. It's not due to the height of the van, it's the license
No,
plate.
it's their commercial vehicle, so they're not
Commercial
allowed.
vehicle, okay.
Yeah.
But your private passenger folks who are doing the 4 to 6 p.m., they can go in the Merit.
They
Because,
could,
like
yes.
we said, those are vehicles like in the parking lot here.
Yes.
Okay. The other piece, because obviously we're going to talk about this again, is I think I just want to make sure I understand, using your map, I said to my fellow commissioners before I came in here, you know, when I go to the town landfill, I still call it a dump. It is an amazing amount of pavement out there, and I think this is a very you know, it's a very exciting use of that building. I mean, you said at the very beginning, the challenge for us is, and I being very candid, you applied in October, but this is the first chance we have to talk to you. So I think my concern, I was out there, is I'm trying to envision the current traffic out there is the landfill customers, and then some to the Wallingford Animal Shelter. And so I'm trying to figure out exactly, I was trying to visualize it, you know, and there's been improvements in that area with the other active user on that street. And I'm trying to visualize the truck traffic interacting with the current traffic, which is definitely very small. And I'm still having a tough time, even though you've talked about, okay, here's phase 1, here's phase 2, here's phase 3. What I'm trying to visualize is it's a combination of tractor trailers, which will always be there overnight, so they won't be arriving the day, so they're not part of the daily traffic. But it's the mid-morning, you're actually creating peak vehicle trips during the middle of the day, but obviously that's the numbers that work for your plan.
Yeah.
It's probably the 4 to 6 is where I'm having the challenge. I'm having a challenge with the description of the operation, the description of the private passengers, and trying to figure that out. Only because, and again, I'm thinking of the current traffic conditions out there. But forget John Street, because if you're planning to address that, it is actually your on-site area, because that intersection is just controlled by a stop sign. And then you go further down, and by the electric division, now you have a light, which frankly isn't used. I mean, you know, it's interesting. So I'm just trying to visualize that. I don't think your counts talk about your trips. Did I miss in here an exhibit on the current traffic in that area? Is that part of the traffic? Because I have like three different traffic studies.
In the traffic studies, there are our background trips, which is the existing traffic
Right.
diagrams, and then what we did is we progress those out for a year to capture what we call the background, because that's when they're planning to open their site. And so those diagrams are there. And then what we did is we added on the site generated traffic to that.
Okay. I'm not shy to ask this question. So looking at your exhibit from your trip distribution figure 4 from the traffic study, South Cherry Street site drive. I'm asking you might know the answer. I don't know, and I'm not, you know. South Cherry Street, excuse me, Pent Road, it ends at the landfill. Did you explore the option of using or opening that up? I'm not sure about the ownership, or if there was any discussion about potentially accessing the rest of Pent Road. Because when you go to the landfill, if those of us who live in town, you come down and it's barricaded. So I'm not sure, it's not signed as a dead end, but I wasn't sure, was there any discussion about potentially using that to get you out to Tully's?
Not traffic-wise, no.
Okay. What's to the cemetery?
So, Mr. Fitzsimmons, while he's looking, I just wanted to make sure I understand your concerns on the 4 to 6 p.m. Trips, as I understand it. I think Mr. DeBurman can actually better state, since he does this, and
I'm just listening to this back and forth, and I appreciate your concern on the 4 to 6 with the flex drive. So we're talking about passenger vehicles at 4 to 6. Again, we think of 25 every half an hour. So if we're talking about 4 to 6, 25, 25, 25, and 25 in and out. Now, every half hour is a trip that we're counting 25 coming in, 25 going out, another 25 in and out. Does that double the count? So am I talking 200 trips there in a 2-hour shift, or is it 100 vehicles coming in? I don't plan or pretend to be a traffic expert. I just wanted to make sure that
It'd be 200 trips. Yes.
200 trips, yes.
That's
A
coming
trip
and going.
in, a trip load, a trip out. Yes, sir.
That's
Thank
correct.
you. Okay, thank you.
And again, I'm being very candid because I think it's a unique site. It's because there's only one way in. I mean, everyone's got to go in the same way. So that's what I'm looking at, because this site isn't used to this type of traffic, and all the roads, you're limited in your access points is probably where I'm going with that. That's why I'm asking the question. I mean, 24/7 operation, I get that, and I understand. I think your explanation. It's just I'm trying to think of the vehicle movements in that area and the impact to the roadway, because I think, as I said at the beginning, and I'll finish, that's why you're here. This to me, the use is fine. I think it's the traffic that's the issue. I think, and I appreciate your comments at the very beginning. I'd share with you about you addressing the nonconformities with the landscaping. And I like landscaping, but here I think this application is going to be all about the trips, whether it's trucks, cars, or the flex vans. So, but I'll defer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimmons. Any other questions before we go to our peer reviewer? Mr. Hine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify something that you mentioned earlier. I think you said earlier that one of the ways that you addressed Mr. Hua's concerns about the light at John Street and Route 5 was that you transferred 25% of the flex vehicles going over to the Merritt Parkway. Did I understand that?
Flex drivers and the associates that work in the building.
Okay. And I guess my question is, what was the justification for that? So your initial traffic study says, has them all going over to John Street. Mr. Hua then raises a concern, and you come back and there's a change of 25% of those associates now going to the Merritt. But what was the basis by which you did that? What caused you to do that other than Mr. Hua's concern?
He brought up the concern, which made us re-look at it. That if we sent everybody to 91, that's a worst case scenario, that if every single person was coming from that direction. But in reality, as Mr. Hua pointed out, is that the associates can use the Merritt Parkway. So we decided to send some of the traffic that way.
But as you sit here right now, you don't know what direction those associates are going to go.
No, we cannot know.
And the drivers themselves use a optimization system, and that's just based upon pure what the optimal route is to deliver their packages on that given day, correct?
That would be correct.
So even with those drivers, as you sit here today, you have no idea on any given day which direction they're going to go.
It's impossible to predict that for any site. not just an Amazon delivery, it's any business.
Okay. I do have some concern because under the original scenario, that light intersection would have graded out as an F. And we've made changes to improve that. But there's, based upon what I'm hearing right now, there's nothing other than Mr. Hua's concern that caused that number to change. And as you sit here right now, we have no idea whether that 25% change is a valid change or not. It could be that
I think on a
intersection-
daily basis, it could change.
Yeah, but you know, that intersection could be grayed out as an F.
It could, or it could be an A if nobody goes that way.
Right, well, I understand that,
Yeah.
but is that the likely scenario?
I think the likely scenario is that some of them will go that way, some will go towards the merit, which is what we
Okay.
did in our addendum, yes.
Yeah, no, and the reason why I'm asking the questions is because I want to know how we
Yeah.
came to that change, because under one scenario, that could be an F intersection, and under another, it could be something
And
else. So-
is just as a side that OSTA will be reviewing it as well, so if they don't agree with something, they will come back and have us change.
Fair enough, fair enough.
So Mr. Hine, just to follow up, I think what the peer reviewer was emphasizing was the original assumption that none of the traffic could go to the merit was not correct, because the flex drivers and the employees who are coming in or leaving can use it, and it makes good traffic sense, which I think BL agrees with, that some can now use exits 64 and 65. So I think what was being pointed out is the original assumption was too strict, and that's how we get to the change. It's not just like, oh, we just find a way to avoid this bad letter grade. It's reality, and I think that's what we're doing. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I assume Mr. Hua will comment on that as well. So I just wanted to give you the opportunity to make your case, and I'm sure we'll hear from Mr. Hua. Thank you.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of quick questions again on this traffic concerns. And I'm very happy to hear that we are going to have an addendum number 2. And hopefully, that answers these questions. It sounds like we're going to hear from Mr. Hu in a few minutes. But the one thing that we haven't really talked about is item number 1, and that's the suggested improvements to the intersection of Ball Street and Pent Road. And there's a big professional differing of opinion between the peer reviewer and you as far as what needs to be done there. And I'm just hoping that that question has been addressed in the addendum, and maybe Mr. Hua can speak to that. To use a pun, that was the biggest roadblock for me, and these couple of concerns. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Allenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to make sure that I understand, I'm looking at the traffic study addendum number 1. I'm actually on page 12, and it references a table 5A, but the table on the page that follows is 3A. Is that just a typo?
Must be.
That is correct, it should be 3A.
And when it references the table in the subsequent pages where it says 5A, it really means this table.
3A, yes.
Okay. So just so that I understand the 3 columns where it says no build, build, and build improvement. No build is current, build is during the process of construction, build improvement is final stage, or what does that mean?
No, what that is no build is the current condition, projected out for 1 year, the traffic. The build condition is after it's operational. And the build improvement is when we tried to retime the traffic signals to improve the flow of traffic and improve the levels of service at the intersection. So that's what the improvement was.
So build improvement is the hopeful.
Well, we would do hopeful improvements that we would hope that the DOT would be amenable to making.
Okay, but the only guarantee we would have would be the build column.
Yes, because it would be up to OSTA to make the decision to make any improvements to traffic signals.
Okay, so I'm just looking at page 14, and it says in the fourth line, it says that the one intersection that is projected to degrade, where is Route 5 at John Street, degrades from a B to C. And that, to me, looking at it, that's the overall with all of the turns from the B at 12.4 down to the C at 32.3?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm looking at the next page on page 14, right where the there's that US Route 5 to 91 Wharton Brook connector. And I'm just looking at it, and it looks like the Route 5 northbound, the through and right turn also degrades on the B piece, and it looks like the left turn degrades on the C piece, but there's no overall degrading.
Correct.
So there is a slight degrading, even though they stay within the C range, there is degrading of traffic in that intersection, in that part of the intersection as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Anything D or above is acceptable, though.
Okay. I'm just making sure I'm reading the tables correct. Thank you for helping me.
You're correct.
Thank you. Any other commission members before we go to our peer reviewers? Seeing none, Mr. Hua, you're up. And again, I'd certainly like to thank you for taking time and reviewing this traffic study, and we're certainly anxious to hear some of your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kermit Hua. My practice is KWH Enterprise LLC in Meriden. I reviewed the traffic study addendums 1 and 2 for this project and the associated supporting plans and materials. I first prepared a review letter in January 10th. I received a response from BL Company on February 19th. I prepared a second letter on March the 6th, and I received a second response from BL Company yesterday on March the 10th. Now, I won't go through all the original comments in my first letter. After my first rounds of back and forth with BL Company, there were 3 issues remained, outstanding issues remained in my March 6th letter to BL Companies. One is the improvements for the intersection of Bent Road and Bell Street. The second is the improvements to the intersection of John Street and Route 5. Ball Street, I apologize, it's Bent Road and Ball Street. The third is I had some questions and disagreements about the trip distribution used in BL's first traffic study and addendum number 1. Now, in the March 10th reply and addendum number 2, which I received yesterday, essentially the response to the 2 improvement issues, the BL response was no. The third issue, BL did revise their trip distribution in response to my comments about the why so few people are using the Merritt exits 64 and 65. To answer Commissioner Hines' question, what's the reason behind my comment on the trip distribution? The reason is in this report, it analyzed 3 peak hours: morning peak hour, afternoon peak hour, and the midday peak hour. If you look at the volumes of the trip generation, 100% of the morning peak hour trips, 100% of the afternoon peak hour trips, and 42.5% of the midday weekday peak hour trips were passenger cars. So if you assign 2-3%, vehicle going towards the direction of exits 64 and 65, which were the position BL took in the traffic study and addendum number 1, it doesn't make sense, right? So, I agree with BL's revision in addendum number 2, which they assign some traffic towards that because, like the gentleman from Amazon Logistics says, the goal, obviously, you need to discourage those DSP trucks. I assume their software must have function, discourage them using Route 15. But for everyone else, use the shortest road, most convenient road, most, the nearest road. I think a lot of people will use Route 15. So I agree that revision reflected in addendum number 2. Now, but as a result of that, a new issue emerges from that revision of addendum number 2. Mr. Fitzsimmons zeroing on the issue of trip generation. Really, how many trips we're talking about, right? So that's a key question, especially for the DSP trucks in the middle of weekdays. Now, the most recent memo we got from Amazon Logistics and the number that BL company used in the traffic addendum number 2 is 175 DSPs per day. Now, that 175 number, according to the Amazon Logistics memo, is for 10.8 months of the year. Now, what about that 1.2 month of the year? Is that not important? So, what's the number for the 1.2 month? It's 275 trips, DSPs per day. Now, if you look at the level of service results, especially regarding the intersection, Mr. Fitzsimmons is interested in intersection of John Street and Route 5, with 175 DSPs per day, we are looking at level of service D for the John Street approach. So I think the logical question to ask is, we need to look at 275 scenario, because that is the busiest month of the year. That's the month of December and the middle of the year when Amazon has sales. I don't think, people of Wallingford will simply accept, because it's December, I'm not concerned about delays on John Street at the intersection of John Street and Route 5. So I think BL needs to look at the 275 scenario. In other words, 275 DSPs per day for a weekday. Go back to the level of service table. If you look at addendum 2, the level of service table in addendum 2, we're looking at level of service D for 175. If you have 275, that can easily push into level of service E and F. So that old question that emerges again, even though you assign some of the trips to exits 64 and 65 of Route 15. So that's my first issue, part of my first disagreement about the trip distribution, trip generation. In this case, a trip generation. We need to reflect a more intense trip generation scenario. Now, as a result of diverting some of the trips to exits 64 and 65 Route 15, now we are talking about traffic, passenger cars, associates, managers, flex drivers, using the routes of South Cherry Street, go to Wall Street, go to Quinnipiac, go to River Road to access those two exits. So a reasonable question is, what are the impacts of those routes? Because those are primarily single-family residential streets. If you look at the response from BL company dated February 19th, they mentioned, I quote, "The intersection Ward Street and Quinnipiac Street has long cycle length due to its configurations." So what's the impact of this long cycle length? By the way, this long cycle length, what it means, because the intersection is so long, you have a lot of green time and all red time. In other words, you have a lot of wasted signal time at that intersection. So I think it's not unreasonable to ask a question, at this already inefficient intersection with inefficient traffic operation, what will be the impact of adding those associate traffic, manager traffic, and flex driver traffic? Before I forget, I just want to call attention to the fact that this development is very different from your typical business or industrial or commercial development. If you have a, say, industrial plant, usually the most intense traffic is employees, right? When employees come, obviously they have different shifts. But what's different from the Amazon side is they do have a midday. And actually, the midday, especially the DSP operation, they're like I quote the applicant's language, they operate in waves. So it's really not limited to the peak hour that's used in this study, 12 to 1. It's in waves. It's almost have a similar pattern, at least from the side driveway. It continues going when compared to a similar typical industrial sites. There's not much going on, during the midday, and probably people go to lunch and stuff like that. So it's a fundamentally different use and different traffic pattern. But I think that's something the commission needs to be aware of. So I talked about my first point is about distribution, generation, level of service. Like I said, with higher 275 DSP, we will look at the deteriorated level of service at the intersection of John Street and Route 5. So that's sort of a segue into my second point. What are we going to do with the intersection of John Street and Route 5? As you are aware, there's a narrow and relatively a railroad bridge relatively in poor condition just west of that intersection and with only one lane. And it's difficult to imagine to improve to anything without significant expense and time and on that approach, on the John Street approach at the intersection. At the same time, if you look at the traffic access John Street, when you make a left turn from the I-91 exits to the south, you will have a very heavy left turn traffic. Fortunately, with the 175 scenario, we are not seeing a lot of delays at this intersection, but that definitely will be a concern under the 275 scenario with 275 DSPs per day. So what that may entail is you may have a very long queue, northbound left turn queue, waiting to turn onto John Street, essentially taking over the left lane and leaving only one lane on northbound Route 5. So that is the reason behind my suggestion of have some kind of turn pocket or turn lane, if you will, for the northbound approach traffic that waiting to make the left turn onto John Street. Now, the applicant argues that, OSTA and DOT will review it. But I don't think, yes, they will review it, and they will eventually make the final determination. But I think that fact really doesn't stop the commission from recommending some kind of improvements to that intersection. Mind you, at this time, we're not asking the applicant to rebuild a bridge on John Street. Just do something that can really make a difference as a result of, to address some of the traffic impact, especially during those busy December month traffic. So I'm, recommending adding a left turn lane, northbound left turn lane for people waiting to make a left turn onto John Street. That obviously it's up to the commission to decide on that recommendation. I think the commission definitely can recommend that, and say subject to DOT or OSTA concurrence of language to that fact. So that is John and Route 5 intersection. About the intersection of Penn Road and Ball Street, Mr. Fitzsimmons mentioned that when he was out there, you really can see a wide pavement. But remember, on some wide pavement, there's a property line. So in other words, if you build this thing and put a curb there, the intersection will not be that wide. Why do I say that? Why that becomes an issue? I looked at the two exhibits BL company prepared that showing the, exiting and entering, 53 tractor trailers. When those tractor trailers go through that intersection of Penn Road and Ball Street, they essentially will take over the whole width of the intersection. So in other words, if you are someone driving a passenger car going the opposite direction, if you don't stop in time, there is a concern about traffic safety. Now, The gentleman from Amazon Logistics mentioned the hours for the tractor trailers are 10:30 p.m. to 8:30 a.m. What's interesting here is that overlaps entering traffic from managers and entering traffic from a first shift of associates. So I agree with the notion that, probably very few people will go to the animal, the landfill, the animal control officer's office during the hours of the tractor trailers, 10:30 p.m. to 8:30 a.m. But there will be many associates and managers, passenger cars. So I remember, hearing the gentleman from Amazon Logistics said safety is paramount at Amazon. I think that's a commendable sentiment, but I think that sentiment should not stop at a property boundary, because ultimately the people who are using that intersection that may face the conflict with those tractor trailers are Amazon employees, they are managers, they are service providers, they are contractors. So that is the reason I recommend, widening the intersection to take a corner out of the Amazon property in such a way that when you have two opposing tractor trailers going, they can pass each other safely at the same time and provide adequate pavement markings so, average passenger cars don't want, because that will become a very wide intersection, provide adequate pavement markings so passenger cars can follow and, in a typical lane width. So that's my second recommendation. So that's the 3 points I have, and that's all at this point. Any questions from the commission?
Commission members? Yeah, Mr. Matarazzo.
I had a question, and knowing the area, I started thinking about the traffic that's being diverted towards 15. And I'm thinking about Quinnipiac Street, where everything kind of bottlenecks into Quinnipiac Street heading towards 15 by the park. And I'm wondering what the impact of the diverted traffic is going to have at that intersection. I know it's quite a distance away from the site, but there's really no other way to get to that area other than going through the Quinnipiac Street intersection where it bottlenecks down from the park, and you end up crossing the Quinnipiac River there.
I agree with you 100%, Commissioner, on that point. But unfortunately, that's not covered by the existing traffic study and the two addendums.
Do you feel that's something that should be addressed?
I think so, yes.
Thank you.
Other commission members? Mr. Hine.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Or Mr. Chairman, sorry.
Whatever.
Mr. Hua, did you take into account, similar to Mr. Matarazzo's question, I have noticed recently, because I use the exit all the time, coming off of exit 13 off of 91 onto the connector down to Route 5, they recently changed the traffic pattern down there so that the right lane now is both a left turn lane and a right turn lane. And what you're finding is that there's a lot of trucks that are now approaching that light at that intersection in the right-hand lane when they used to stay in the left-hand lane.
They have to make a wide turn, yeah.
Right. And that has changed the traffic flow down there considerably. And I'm wondering if you at all took into account what the increased traffic from this center would do at that intersection.
I think fortunately the fact is the 53 tractor trailers, they operate, as the gentleman said, 10:30 p.m. to 8:30 a.m. Probably a little bit overlap with the morning peak hour. So afternoon peak hour. So most of the DSPs, they are not large vehicles if you have seen them on the streets. So I think most of the traffic from our side is DSPs. That's the main concern. As far as the net number of trips, it's DSPs. Like you said, the 53-foot tractor trailers, I forgot the exact number, probably like 10 or something like over 24. It's not an intensive, impact to that location.
Yeah, no, and my question is not so much focused on tractor trailers, because I think when the tractor trailers are coming and going, it's gonna be at a time that
Yeah.
wouldn't really affect that. My question is more focused on the DSPs.
Right.
Because at that intersection,
You have to yield to those guys.
yeah, and I'll tell you something, I mean, generally speaking, when you get off that exit now at 6, 7 o'clock at night,
Uh-huh.
it's, those cars in the right-hand lane are 10 deep,
Right.
at least. And, now you're gonna be adding, and I think probably around that time, you may have some of these DSPs coming back, to the center. Because all of these trucks, they leave, but they come back eventually. They're not the flex vehicles.
Right. I think before 9 p.m. if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I take it you did not take that into account when taking a look at the traffic effect.
Right, I think that's a good point, especially, I think the vulnerability of, those smaller DSPs when compared to large tractor trailers at that intersection. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah. If it, the existing payment marking doesn't work, that's something, we need to talk to DOT about, probably.
That it, Mr. Hine? Anyone else? I guess I'll bring it back to the applicant. Certainly you've heard the way I look at it. I think there were certainly four points that I wrote down that Mr. Hua mentioned, the 275 and looking at that, the John Street intersection and perhaps a northbound left turn lane, looking at the impacts with the redirection of traffic on whether it be Cherry Street, Ward Street, going down, as Mr. Matarazzo mentioned, down to Quinnipiac Street. So certainly those things would, I think, need to be looked at and addressed, as well as, again, what was pointed out, which is the turning, from Ball Street onto Penn and perhaps some conflicting turning motion. So with that, I'll turn it to you, gentlemen, for some of your responses to that, if you would, or if you'd like to.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, Mr. Hua, we'd like to address some of those right now. I think we have some answers for you that, and I will start with Mr. DeBurba, and then we'll go to Mr. Dion but I think the operational question, which is about the 275, I think needs to be addressed first and foremost, so.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hua mentioned the 175, 275 numbers. I wanted just to call to his attention, I believe what we talked about in our operational narrative and crafting this with Mrs. Hand, our steady state numbers for DSP delivery vans is 130. And we had crafted the narrative with Mrs. Hand to say we would not exceed 175. During the peak season, we would not exceed 275. And if we were to do that, or if we contemplated those numbers, we would come back to Planning Commission and ask for their approval and comments and what have you. But again, we're talking about the number 130 steady state, primarily the 10 and a half months out of the year, excluding the few days in July during what we call Amazon Prime and the holiday season starting right after Thanksgiving.
No, I think we all understand that, but it still leaves open the question of the 275,
And, well,
as far as the impact of that.
Mr. DeBourbon, correct me if I'm wrong, but with the 275, it's not an extra 100 vehicles in the peak hour. They're going to be spread out. That I think he's going to start deliveries at 9 o'clock instead of 10, and keep the deliveries going till 2 o'clock instead of 1 o'clock. So that spreads the 100 cars out to another hours, not in that peak hour.
But again, these are hypotheticals that we would not exceed those numbers. I don't know if in your traffic studies or in your analysis or the formula, if you will, of doing that is assuming that we would do 275. Casey Hand and I talked about that as a ceiling, that if they were to exceed, and again, what generated or triggered that was the size of the Allnex parking lot, and I addressed those concerns with her. When I talked about the Allnex parking lot, she said, well, you know, if you have X number of van parking spots on the Amazon facility, why so big at the Allnex parking spot? And my response to that was that, you know, it was not necessarily an all or nothing deal with Allnex for that section of the Allnex parking lot, but again, if I just took a portion of that to cover my peak, I wouldn't want another user coming in there and parking their vehicles and crisscrossing. Again, as I mentioned earlier in my narrative, one of the things that we've learned over our years, infancy, 5 years at Amazon, is I need to be freestanding. I don't want to interfere with other businesses, other neighborhoods, things like that. So we like to be freestanding at Amazon. We'll take additional real estate, even if we don't need it, to contemplate functionality and flow and proper operating procedures there. The other thing we talked about were the points of ingress and egress on the site, and it also having a larger parking lot. Allnex allows for me to segregate company C, D, E, and F onto the Allnex site. Again, they're competing business. I mean, they're working with us at Amazon, but they are different companies. Again, it's nice to keep those people separate. So again, that's why the additional parking spot. Casey's concern was, you know, are you going to pull a fast one and put something in there or add more? That's why we agreed to the ceiling. And I said, no, it's the 130 and if we go above those numbers, those ceiling numbers, we'll come back and talk to you.
But just with the DSP drivers, are they all on the Allnex site, or there's some on your main site? Is that correct? Because you had two.
Yes, sir. Yes,
you
sir.
have two separate
Yes, sir.
parking areas. One parking area for the employees that are on site,
Keep
and
them
then there's
segregated.
another.
Yes, sir.
And then there's another section, which is to the, I guess, south.
I have about 95 parking spots, the 11 by 27 striping, if you will, for those vans. Again, think of company A and company B. If I put company A there with, let's say, 35 vans, I'll need to keep another 25 spots vacant for their personal vehicles to park in those oversized spots as well, just to keep them, company A segregated to company A. Company B, C, and D, and E off to the Allnex site. I want them to be able to park their personal vehicles close by to where their vans are designated. And we do have them color-coded on site to say, this company will be here, this company will be there. Keep them separated.
So essentially, though, for your delivery vehicles, forgetting about the on-site employees, for your delivery vehicles in the parking area, in the various parking lots or that you have, essentially half of those spaces would be vacant.
Yes, sir.
During the
overnight hours.
During the hours, even during operation, because someone comes in, parks their car, walks next door, goes next door, takes their van.
Yes, sir.
All right.
A lot of vacancies during the day and at night, given it's not really a 1-to-1 or, you know, I need 2-to-1. It's a inefficiency to sit there and say, if I had a driver pull in, stop his vehicle, turn it off, back the van out, pull his car, a 1-to-1 ratio. I need that almost 2-to-1
It doesn't
ratio.
work.
Yes, sir, it does not.
Moving on.
As to analyzing more intersections going towards the Merritt Parkway, we certainly can do that, but we didn't because according to OSTA and the standards, it's usually you would analyze an intersection if you're adding 100 trips to it or 50 left turns, and we wouldn't be doing that on any intersection going that way. So that's why we left those off.
That's certainly something you could do if the commission wanted you to, if the commission asked for you to do it.
If the commission asks, I'm sure we could go out and take some traffic counts and analyze that intersection, yes.
Okay?
Are you going to speak to the John Street?
The John Street and the Ball Street?
The John Street design question is Jeff Dewey's realm.
I guess the one thing on the John Street Route 5 intersection that I want to comment on from the legal perspective is that is OSTA basically preempts the town. What the town can do is make a recommendation, but for example,
Sure.
it would be, you would give us an approval subject to OSTA, not opposed to giving us an approval subject to your requirement.
No, I think we understand that.
Yeah, yeah, so I just want to make sure that.
No, I think all the commission members are aware of that.
Okay.
We don't supersede the state.
And, I don't know if you want to talk to the Wall Street, Penn Street. That's not in my realm.
Should I grab the hand mic? Oh, thank you. Basically, that's a very good point, Mr. Hua made with the conflict with the employees. We were actually thinking the typical local traffic on Ball and Penn would not be at the same time as a tractor trailer truck. So we will look into that deeper. Obviously, with the turning radius, it creates, takes an existing nonconformity and makes it exponentially worse by encroaching that far. So there's got to be some give and take that we'll have to figure out as to at what level we can provide additional travel lane without having it infringe that far onto the property, and again making the site that much more non-conforming than as it is.
I think that would also maybe take a parking space away from you or so, although I'm not certain the way that would be configured when I looked at it.
Correct. We also have the availability to slide parking on Pent Road. We could slide parking farther southwest, and on Ball Street we could slide it farther to the east as well to make that turn. So I'm really not concerned so much of the parking, just the infringement on the property itself and how in much more non-conforming.
Understand. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that, we've expressed, I think we've addressed as best we can at this point in time what the commission's concerns that have been raised. I suppose we could, the others may wish to speak in this hearing, and we can come back and respond to that if there's other information. Of course, someone was saying, well, you don't anticipate closing tonight. We were always hopeful, but we're also realistic. So, but if you are inclined to close tonight, we're happy to answer any additional questions you may have. So,
Well, I think as you point out, this is a public hearing, so certainly it's open to the public for comments, and provided there's no additional questions from commission members. I'm not sure if Mr. Talbot, I know you've had an opportunity to review the application to some degree. I don't know if you have any comments that you'd like to make. Certainly you don't feel compelled to make any.
No, not at this point.
Okay.
we would certainly like to come back and address anything raised and make a final statement or whatever statement is appropriate when the public's had their
Absolutely.
opportunity.
So again, at this point in time, this is a public hearing. I would ask any members of the public who would like to speak on the application, if they please come forward, state their name and address and their comments. And we'll let this young lady first. And
Representative Mary Mashinsky. I live at 188 South Cherry, so I'm right near the proposed application site. And it is a residential neighborhood that I live in. There are many children there, and they are active at times of the day when there might be some conflict with heavier traffic from the application. But before I say that and ask for conditions, I want to welcome Amazon to Wallingford. I do think it's a good employer, and we could certainly use additional jobs here in tax base. So I want to make crystal clear that I do welcome Amazon. However, this is a residential neighborhood. It's heavily and densely populated. Just to give an example, on Halloween I get anywhere from, lately it's been dropping, but I usually get about 50 kids for Halloween. And some things that would be helpful for the neighborhood would be to route the delivery vehicles to avoid South Cherry Street, Clifton Street, East Street, and one of the commissioners mentioned Quinnipiac, unless there is a local delivery to someone on those streets. And I would ask the commission to make that a requirement of the permit. Second, to require that the private vehicles that are used for delivery service be clearly marked on both sides of the exterior of the vehicle. This came from a person on the street recommended this. And that would be to monitor compliance with any restrictions the town puts on the delivery vehicles. Because there's no way for the average resident to know it's an Amazon vehicle if you are using a private service. The next one would be to improve the signals at the intersection of John Street and Route 5, which was talked about quite a bit here tonight. And one recommendation was to extend the green for eastbound John Street. And you could do it with a sensor so that at certain times of the day the green would be extended so the traffic doesn't build up on the bridge. And also to consider widening westbound John Street to provide a turning lane towards Allnex. And to do that, you might need part of the church parking lot, which is generally not filled. It's generally mostly vacant, and only one end of it is used. And then, if possible, this is my request. If possible, if you can do a green roof or add solar to the roof, just because of the surface area of that vacant facility is quite large, and maybe we can do some community good with it. I don't know how structurally sound it is to put something on the roof, but if you could look into that, that would be great. But I do welcome Amazon, and I just ask you as a good corporate citizen to realize there is a residential neighborhood there. There are a lot of kids there, people walking their dogs and so on, and I want you to do whatever you can to protect their safety. Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Other members of the public?
Tim Ryan, Economic Development Commission. I want to talk about the traffic for a bit. One of the benefits of growing up in this town is that I remember when American Cyanamid was there and when SciTech was there, and they had upwards of 1,000 employees. 1,000 employees. All right, so even they were in 24/7. So even if it was split evenly, over 300 people coming and going every single day, and I would submit that the traffic use that we're talking about now is less than we've experienced before. So this whole infrastructure has been challenged and has been functional for the longest time until those sites have been downsized. Now, SciTech and Rome are the two occupants of the old American Cyanamid site. They have a total combined 160 employees. So if this roadway system handled 1,000 employees before, and we all know there hasn't been any structural changes, then why can't it handle the traffic that we've proposed here? I think it can. And I share the concerns, and it's good dialogue, and it's good to get it out there, but I just don't see the issue. I honestly don't. I mean, it handled much more traffic before than is being proposed right here. I also want to, welcome Amazon to the site. In economic development, we look at sites. We are always after highest and best use of a site. You all know what that site looks like. I mean, nothing detrimental to the ownership. I don't want anybody getting sensitive on me. But let's face it, this is going to polish that apple pretty nice. Across the street from that site, we have BYK USA. All right, a major player. That's their North American headquarters. Their site is beautiful, green lawns, etc. And what do they look out the windows at now? What are they going to look out the windows at when these folks come in and clean this site up and make it really, really nice? We know that, or at least I think most people know, that our town landfill will soon be a huge solar array. I mean, how great will that be? So, now picture this site improved, solar array in the landfill. I mean, folks, this is a good thing for us. Let's not let it slip away. Let's see, what else do I have here? I also add to the traffic that when SciTech and American Cyanamid had that 1,000 employees, people traversing back and forth for shift work, we had Little League fields down there too. Throw on another 50 or 60 cars. The traffic consultant or peer reviewer had mentioned the corner of Ball Street and Pent Road. There are significantly fewer trucks in this application and this use than there were there before. That was a trucking terminal before. It was a white goods most recently, a white goods distribution facility. It had a multiple of trucks a day. These guys are talking about 10 to 12 trucks a day. Now, I don't know how many trucks they had before, but we all know those trucks were going up and down the road, and it worked. Of course, they parked, and they rearranged the site, but they parked where the tractors were always sticking out in the road, and you had to circumvent them to get to the landfill. This, by far, is an improvement on this site. So, I think traffic is always something to be looked at, but I have to admit, I do not share your concerns at all. The infrastructure has handled much more traffic than these folks are bringing to the site. So, with that, I would ask your consideration. I understand, OSTA has the ultimate say on the Route 5 intersection piece, but I would very much appreciate you reconsidering and potentially voting on accepting this application tonight, based on the comments that I just made. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public would like to speak on the application? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. If any commissioners have any final, Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question, and it's probably a follow-up to the last two and the first and only two speakers from the public. I'm not sure if I heard it correctly. So Amazon Logistics is the applicant, correct? Or is it Amazon?
That was the first one. Forgive me on that. As far as the lease entity or who's leasing the building, it's an Amazon entity. I believe it's called Amazon Services Inc. Something like that. I don't remember the exact name of the lease, but it is an Amazon entity.
Right. Here's my question, and it's a follow-up probably to the two speakers. How many employees would this employ in Wallingford? Because when you described the DSP, you talked about contracting with a service. So those
it's not a service. I didn't use the word service. It's an independent contractor company that hires the DSPs employed by that company, but contracted with Amazon. So they deliver exclusively. They wouldn't be there if we weren't there.
Gotcha. So I guess the question is, how many employees of the parent, Amazon, would be at this facility if it was completed?
Well, we talk about 125 associates, the overnight sortation associates, a management staff of probably 8 to 10 for the overnight, and a management staff during the day of another 10 to 15.
Just to be, thank you. So just to be clear, the piece that we talk about is the Amazon Flex. Those are not employees, right?
They're not.
So they're not in this number.
Independent contractors that sign up through Amazon, go through a vetting process, a very rigorous vetting process, but they are not Amazon employees.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimmons. Anyone else? I guess with this, I'd just ask the commission how they'd like to proceed with that. Certainly, we've had some comments from, our peer reviewer. We've had some responses from the applicant. From at least from my perspective, I'd certainly like the opportunity to look at the addendum number 2 and the responses. I believe we've got this evening. We received the response or some of the responses and found a missing page. Candidly, I haven't had an opportunity to look at it. I know we've heard from Mr. Hua, but at least from my perspective, I think it's beneficial to, at least for me, to look at that and to spend a bit more time on that. I don't know whether people feel as far as, looking at the applicant to take a look at the additional, the 275, if that should perhaps be, be looked at. So again, I'd open it up to commission members. That's just certainly my feelings.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I do think we have a couple of unanswered questions as far as the traffic and the peak hours, and certainly that times have changed since Cyanamid was in business. Population has increased. Neighboring cities have increased traffic through Wallingford. So, I think we do have to take a look And I do want to state that I am in favor of this Amazon coming in. And I think, they are a great corporate citizen and they will be a good neighbor. And, they want to make it work, as the representative said. And, I'm sure we can, work out these small traffic details. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Matarazzo.
I would just like to say I would concur with you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Cohen's comments. And again, I have no. I would like to see you come into this town and expand as well. But I think it might be a little premature tonight to vote on this without getting some more feedback and reviewing that amended traffic study and take into account a lot of the comments made.
Thank you. I guess I just asked, is that adequate direction as far as, to you gentlemen, as far as what the commission would like to see?
Yeah, I think it's, that we understand the questions that have been posed by the commission, at least I think I do. We are very hopeful in trying to achieve our target of opening this year. So, we are enthusiastic to respond and make it as clear as possible that to resolve the issues as soon as we can. So,
sure. Well, again, from my perspective, I would hope that after we receive the various information that you're going to update, and have, again, Mr. Hua has an opportunity to take a look at it, the commission would be able to act on the application one way or the other, at our next meeting. I certainly would encourage you, to get that information to Mr. Hua as soon as you can, so we don't run into a situation where, this evening the commission just receives a response and does not have really enough time to look at that response. So I would certainly encourage you to do that.
we certainly understand that, and it was
no, I understand.
There's a lot of time. There's not much time to react to his March 6th letter, but we were back and forth, and we understand the situation. We certainly appreciate that you can't make a decision when you haven't even seen the document yet yourself. So appreciate that very much.
Okay. So at this point in time, if you have anything further to say,
I think I'm happy to learn from the commission that you appreciate what we've done with the landscaping and the other issues. I think as the commission has certainly made clear, traffic and distribution of the traffic is the concern that we need to further refine.
Sure.
And
no, I think we all can agree that what's being proposed from the building standpoint, the structure standpoint, the improvements you're looking to do, as far as landscaping and even with the just with the parking lots and making the site more presentable is very encouraging. So I think there are just those issues that we talked about that we do need to get a better understanding of, and I think to a very large degree of the commission members, I know, speaking for myself, just a comfort level with it.
Understood. And with your next regularly scheduled meeting where you anticipate this would be what date? Do you have a?
Our next meeting, we meet the second Monday of the month. So, excuse me?
April 13th.
April 3rd.
So April 13th, that would be.
If you may, I just want to make sure I'm not missing. Yeah, I think we're just discussing how one of the issues that we think we're going to try to address is that our position will be make sure we clarify is that when you talk about 275, that number is not really in a peak hour that you would normally expect, and we will fully.
I think,
explain
again, I
that
think
to
that's
you.
something, you know, again, the gentleman from Amazon, at least for my benefit, gave me a bit more insight into it, that in fact, it's not everybody going out at the same time, there's still the waves, so I assume that's going to be, you know, included in your
We'll
presentation.
make that explanation a little clearer in the report, that the extra 100 vehicles will be
Yeah,
other
just how
ways.
it goes, I think that would be, you know, beneficial.
But again, Mr. Chairman, if I could just clarify again, the 275 is a ceiling. It is not
No, I understand
anticipated
that,
we
I
will
think,
not use
I
those
think we're
numbers.
very clear on that, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So if there's no more comments from the applicant at this point in time, I'd entertain a motion to continue our public hearing to our April meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move the commission continue the special permit application for the warehouse and distribution center for 425 and 528 South Cherry Street to our April 13th meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Cohan, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, any abstentions? Look forward to seeing you gentlemen next month.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. It brings us to our next item on our agenda. It is a new business. It's a site plan parking lot improvements, the Ben Haven School, 125 North Plains Industrial Road, and 50 and 66 to 68 North Plains Highway. The applicant would please come forward to begin preparing for presentation. And Mr. Matarazzo, would you please note all correspondence for the record?
Mr. Chairman, we have application for site plan approval dated March 4th, 2020. And attached to that is a set of plans also dated March 4th, 2020. We have an interdepartmental referral dated February 7th, 2020, signed by the fire marshal. We have correspondence dated February 25th, 2020 to Ben Haven Inc. We have an interdepartmental referral dated February 7th, 2020, signed by the senior engineer. We have correspondence dated March 4th, 2020 from Michael Ott to Casey Hand, town planner. We have correspondence dated February 14th, 2020 to Miss Amanda Killing. We have an interdepartmental referral dated February 7th, 2020, signed by the, looks like, fire marshal. We have application for site plan approval dated February 7th, 2020. Attached to that is an additional set of plans, and I believe that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Matarazzo. If the applicant and or his representative please introduce themselves and begin their presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commission. For the record, I'm Michael Ott.
Gentlemen, can you please just pull that just a little bit closer to you?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Ott. I am a licensed professional engineer and land surveyor with Summerhill Civil Engineers in Madison. Rosalind Page, a licensed land surveyor that I'm sure you all know, Winterbourne Land Services here in Wallingford. And to my right, Neil Payne, who is a licensed environmental professional with Payne Environmental in New Haven. And Mr. John Baldino is behind us in the audience from the Ben Haven organization. So our application is for parking improvements, as you noted, on a parcel of land adjacent to the Ben Haven school site, as well as the Ben Haven Academy site. The Ben Haven school site, the street address is 125 North Plains Industrial Road, and the Ben Haven Academy to the west is, the street address is 50 North Plains Highway.
I think it would be beneficial if someone would just
Sure.
point that out. I
Yeah,
know when I was looking just at the plans themselves, it doesn't take much to confuse me, but I got confused.
Yes, what I would like to do is just give you a brief overview of the layout of the site and the overview of what we're trying to do, and then Mr. Ott and Mr. Payne will get into the details of the parking lot layout. So the existing conditions, or the map that we have up on the easel here, North Plains Industrial Road is over here on the right-hand side, and North Plains Highway is over here. The P&A Park is located to the south here. So Ben Haven owns two parcels of property. They own 125 North Plains Industrial Road, which is here, which is outlined in red, and it's this slightly odd shape of square here with a little finger here. And number 50 North Plains Highway, again, Trail of Terror, if anyone goes there, is down here. 50 North Plains Highway, also owned by Ben Haven, is this property here. And both properties function independently at the moment. There is a walkway between the two of them, and that's in this strip of land. So the additional piece of property that which is involved in this application is known as number 66 North Plains Highway, and it is owned by a separate entity, Vassant LLC. And there are two buildings on this property. It functions as a condominium. So we have the three parcels, two by Ben Haven and one by Vassant. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but never mind. So the purpose of this application is Ben Haven is in need of additional parking spaces, parking area for their business. So what they're looking to do is to purchase about 49,800, almost 50,000 square feet of land from number 66 North Plains Highway. And currently this property is 102,349 square feet. So part of our application was to make sure that if we purchase the back half of number 66 North Plains Highway, that this still functions as a site in and of itself. This building will come down, and Mr. Ott will describe that more completely to you. But this building would come down, and essentially this area will become a parking area. So at the end of the day, if this project moves forward, we would do a lot line revision. This lot line that currently exists between number 125 North Plains Industrial Road and number 66 North Plains Highway, that line would go away and a new lot line would be put in here. This number 66 will end up being 52,500 square feet, so it will still conform area-wise to the I-40 regulations. And again, part of the calculations that we've had to go through as part of this process is to make sure that all of the zoning regulations that would apply to this site we're not creating a non-conformity by doing this lot line revision. So, excuse me, the rear yard setback will still conform, the amount of parking will conform, and your other regulations will still conform. So that in essence is what we're trying to do, do a lot line revision, take this lot line away. 49,800 square feet will be transferred to Ben Haven from Vassant, and a parking lot will be built in here. So does that help clarify?
It certainly explains it for me. Now I know what you're talking about.
Good, good. So what I think now would be appropriate, it would be if Mr. Ott would describe this actual parking lot design
Mr. Payne will talk about the environmental components to it, and then go back
Good.
around.
Thank you.
This may be difficult for the commission to see, I'm going to guess, but hopefully you all have all looked at a plan set. As Ms. Page described, the plan is to remove the easternmost building on this adjoining parcel. Sorry, I'll try to talk into the mic here. And construct a 41 stall parking space for Ben Haven's use, as well as a driveway connection between 125 North Plains Industrial Road, the Ben Haven School, and the Ben Haven Academy at 50 North Plains Highway. There's landscape improvements in accordance with your regulations, perimeter trees around the new parking area, trees within islands, the interior landscaped areas inside the parking area. There are lighting improvements around the parking area also. And there's there is today an existing bituminous concrete sidewalk connection between the school and the Ben Haven Academy. There will be a new sidewalk constructed parallel to the site driveway. There is a subsurface stormwater storage and infiltration system proposed, concrete galleries below the surface adjacent to the new driveway that will take stormwater runoff from the new parking area, as well as, I forgot to mention, a bituminous concrete surfaced recreation play area that will be constructed also. And that system is designed to, it actually exceeds the computed water quality volume per Connecticut DEP's stormwater quality manual. The soils are sands and gravels on this site, outwash soils. We've made sure that the bottom of the infiltration system is a minimum of 2 feet of vertical separation between the bottom of the system and the observed groundwater table. And I think in that really summarizes the improvements. So very, very simple rectangular parking area, a rectangular bituminous play area, recreation area, a new driveway connection between the two Ben Haven properties, and a new sidewalk. Lighting improvements, landscaping improvements, lighting fixtures, all full cutoff fixtures, not very high, only 12 feet or so in height. I should mention that there are some compliance issues with the existing sites. 125 North Plains, 125 North Plains Industrial, 50 North Plains Highway, and 66 North Plains Highway. Mrs. Hand asked me to go out and inspect the sites, and I did, and I made a list of the compliance issues. There's certain things that have to be brought back into compliance so that all of those sites are compliant with their previous site plan approvals. And I can very quickly, if you'd like, I can tell you what those are. On all 3 sites, all the what we now call reserved parking spaces or accessible parking spaces have to be restriped. The pavement markings have to be removed from the pavement, and they have to be relaid out to meet the state building code requirements. At all 3 sites at those spaces, the proper reserved parking space signage has to be installed. We will need to plant additional trees at all 3 sites to meet the landscaping requirements. At 125 North Plains Industrial Road, there's a small section of pavement that goes right to the property line. That needs to be removed to provide the required 5-foot width landscape strip between a parking area and a property line. At 66 North Plains Highway, There are additional parking spaces that should have been constructed, that will need to be constructed. And I think, lastly, Mrs. Hand asked me to look at, and I think I'm going to have to work with the town engineer, look at this intersection with North Plains Industrial Road. There's two curb cuts for the school property, and this southerly one, the curb lines will need to be revised. I think that's a pretty good summary of the compliance issues for the existing sites.
Good. I'm certainly aware that you had, I think, very in-depth discussions with Mrs. Hand concerning the nonconformities and how they do need to be addressed should the commission act on this, on your plan.
So the applicant, Ben Haven, has agreed to make all those changes to bring these sites into compliance. And I think does the commission have any questions at this point?
Anyone, any questions? I don't believe so, sir.
I think this site is subject to an environmental remediation plan, and Mrs. Hand had asked that we gave her a bulleted summary. I don't know if the commission's received that, so I think we'll ask Mr. Payne, if we could, to just give you a brief overview.
Absolutely.
Shall I talk from here? Oh, is this on?
Oh, that's on.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Briefly, the reason I'm involved here is because site redevelopment entails the demolition of the existing structure. There's currently an environmental land use restriction on that structure. Is the commission familiar with environmental land use restrictions from the Connecticut Department?
I believe so.
Right.
I think most commission members are.
Yeah. So in this particular case, the site operated as a machine shop from 1964 until very recently. There was some pollution exterior to the building that was remediated through normal methods, excavation, off-site disposal. There currently exists petroleum contaminated soils underneath the concrete slab, and that's basically what the environmental land use restriction describes on the land records, that we cannot demolish the building or remove the slab floor until we get a temporary release from the state to do that. And that currently, it's been approved by the state, and they're going to be submitting it this week to us, which will have to go on to the land records, and then we'll be in a position to be able to demolish the building and remove the slab as part of redevelopment out there. The goal is to completely remove that soil and to return the site to a position where it meets the regulatory standards for the petroleum contamination that's there. There's very little there in reality. Even though the land use restriction covers the entire footprint of the building, there's really only about 60 to 80 cubic yards of petroleum contaminated soils that are there. We've done some supplemental test cores through the foundation to quantify what was there. Historically, they were unable to do that because it was an operating machine shop and the entire floor was covered with equipment and storage, etc. So we do have our arms around the nature and extent of contamination there. And that's really why I was here today, just in case there was any questions regarding environmental, as the town planner had asked some questions.
Thank you.
Just very quickly, you probably are aware, Mrs. Hand had review comments. We believe we've addressed those and worked them out. We gave Mrs. Hand a written response and revised plans. Also, the town engineer gave us review comments this past Friday, and I worked with her. I made revisions that she requested and spoke with her over the phone, and I believe we were in agreement that we have addressed her comments also, to my knowledge.
Good. Thank you. Commission members with any comments from or questions for the applicant? Again, not to put you on the spot, Mr. Talbot, I know you're just new into this. Do you have any comments that you'd like to make on the on the application?
No, from what I understand, they have or will address all of the staff's comments.
So all the comments or concerns that Mrs. Hand had either have been addressed by the applicant or will be addressed should the commission.
Whatever conditions you might want to attach to a.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing that there's no other commission members, again, it's not a public hearing, but does anyone from the public like to speak on the application? If so, name and address. Seeing none, I guess I'd again bring it back to the commission members if anyone has any final comments. Mr. Fitzsimmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to double check, and if I heard you correctly, you said you received the engineering comments on Friday the 6th?
This past Friday.
Friday the 6th. And you submitted your application February 7th. So did you see the comments to the commission from the Department of Engineering, the suggested conditions of approval?
No, I have not.
Well, that's not good.
No, because it's dated the 6th. That's why I assumed you had that. It's addressed to the Planning and Zoning Commission from the Department of Engineering, and there's 7 conditions of approval.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I did speak to the town engineer. I think we last spoke Monday, I guess it was. I guess it was this past Monday.
It's Wednesday. I forget because normally we meet on Mondays. So, okay. So,
If I could, here is, if you'd like to take a look at them, this is a copy that Mr. Fitzsimmons is referring to. And I'll give you an opportunity to take a look at them.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosalind. I take that back, what I said. I think what this actually, let me compare it. I think this is, so the town engineer had given me a memo, same date, but she had 9 comments in it. I brought a copy with me this evening. I think maybe yeah, this looks like the same memo, except there are 2 less comments for some reason.
good for you.
That's good for you. They seem to have disappeared. The bottom. So I take back what I said, Mr. Chairman. I did see this. The town engineer did send this to me. But we'll have to figure out whatever they were. The 2 missing comments, we will take care of them.
Here's my question, if I could, through you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all the information you gave us. The issue had to do with the parking space and the parking area. So I understand the map and the model, but I think the issue was, are you addressing all the parking needs? Because that is in both comments from the engineering and from planning and zoning. So I just want to make sure that we get something on the record regarding, and I'll tell you, it says the applicant should clearly address parking needs on the record. An insufficient number of parking spaces exist at 66 North Plains, as 8 spaces that were supposed to be there are not, and these spaces must be constructed, or the 5 spaces labeled on the plans as potential must be constructed. So that's my question for you.
We believe we are addressing the parking needs through compliance, the existing conditions, as well as the new parking area. And I neglected to say, the reason for this new parking is the Benhaven School actually has an agreement today to park on another adjoining property, and they would like to end that agreement and be able to park on their land.
So this application will address all of your parking when it's finished, your own property?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. If there's no other questions from commission members, if the applicant has no further comments that he or she'd like to make at this point in time, I'd entertain a motion on the application.
Mr. Chairman, I move the commission approve the site plan for the Benhaven School to demolish a building and construct a parking lot on a portion of property at 66-68 North Plains Highway, which is to be transferred to the property at 125 North Plains Industrial Road, and make an interconnecting driveway between 125 North Plains Industrial Road and 50 North Plains Industrial Highway, as shown on plans entitled the Benhaven School Parking Area Improvements, 125 North Plains Industrial Road, Wallingford, Connecticut, dated February 20th, February 2020, revised to March 1, 2020, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, final plans to reflect the previously approved plans and all sites to be brought into compliance with these previously approved plans, except in the area where the building is proposed to be demolished and the new parking lot constructed, and in the area of the proposed improvements to the interconnecting driveway, and any other area where changes were specifically represented to the Commission and that are compliant with the zoning regulations. This includes the proper maintenance and any necessary components of the bioretention areas, all previously approved landscaping, all previously approved parking and layout, compliant parking spaces, etc. Number 2, final plans to fully address items number 2, also see conditions of number 1 above. Number 3, label square footage and use of each building. Number 11, label areas used for interior landscaping, calculations and reference landscaping variances on sheet 7 of the final plans. And number 14. Number 3, reserved/accessible parking spaces in the new parking area to be moved to the spaces closest to the building at 125 North Plains Industrial Road, if allowed by the building official per state building code. Number 4, all construction vehicles are to use the construction entrance and not to exit utilizing any other exit on the property. Number 5, sedimentation and erosion control bond to be calculated and posted by the applicant once calculated by the Planning and Zoning Department. Number 6, conformance and agreement with compliance of the conditions of the Town of Wallingford Department of Engineering memo dated March 6, 2020, including the conditions of approval. And finally, number 7, applicant to include in the final plans a proposed as-built of the parking lot and parking plan to address discussions here this evening.
We have a motion on the application. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Cohan. Voting beginning with Mr. Cohan, please.
Yes.
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 And yes, your application's been approved. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Very much.
Do you want this back?
No, that you can keep that so you make sure you comply.
Thank you.
Make sure it's not the only copy.
All right, moving on with our agenda. Going down to reports of officers and staff. We have number 5, we have administrative approvals. Which members of our staff would like to take the wheel? And I think
Mr.
it's,
Commissioner, I would
Mr.
love to
Torrey.
take the wheel.
Thank you.
Just one administrative approval since our last meeting. It was a survey waiver granted to the Amarone family for a small 3-season porch on the home. That was it for administrative approvals for the month of February. And I'll carry right through if you would like. Number 6 for the Hartford Line TOD action plan, parts 1 and 2. All we have is a report from the state of Connecticut DOT to the mayor regarding the first 2 phases of the plan. And I can't respond to any further questions regarding that, unfortunately. The ZBA decision.
Just, if I could just back up, I take it this plan initially is going to be discussed with the town council, is that correct?
Good question. This was a January 28th memo to the mayor. Print a copy, part 2, an executive summary.
Doesn't this look like it's from the 1970s? It's the old typewriter said it. Oh my gosh.
I really, unfortunately, do not know how to respond to that. I could certainly get you the answer, the commission, the answer to that. We're sort of winging it here without our leader.
I understand.
And let's see, the ZBA decisions do not reflect from February. This was the disposition of the actions at the February meeting. One not reflected. There was one application continued to the March. I'm losing my days here. We're at the. Yeah, is that one day? No.
It was continued to.
Yes, it was continued, thank you. I'm like losing my days because we're on Wednesday, or I got all fouled up there, pardon me. And also in kind, the legal notice for, here we go, now we got the March date, the March 16th meeting does not include that same application which was continued, and I'll respond to that a little more. One of the applications on the agenda is, that was noted on the legal notice, is for a storage building to be located within the rear setback at 809 North Main Street. The funeral home is looking for some vehicular storage for their associated vehicles. The other, the continued application from the February meeting is generally the same as was submitted in February for office use ×2 on 2 streets within the 50-foot required setback in a town center zone. The applicant appeared at the meeting and showed a small area, reducing the ground level street facing on one of the streets by a small area. Not ample time to review, so they will be reheard. Public hearing has already been opened. They will be on the agenda on March 16th.
So while there has been a modification, it's still they're obviously still looking for a variance, and it still doesn't comply with our zoning regulations, obviously because they're looking for a variance.
And actually, to correct it, it would be office use, but it's 2 variances of the same thing for regarding 2 streets. One has not changed at all. It's still 0 setback, ground level, street facing. The other, yes, a small area. So there's technically 2, which do not change the application.
Okay. So I guess, just knowing that, does any commission member, I know we had sent a notification to the, or a referral to the ZBA concerning that. I would take it that hasn't changed from commission members' feelings on the application? Is it still a variance for office space?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that not sure if there's any further direction we would need to, to give to you when you attend the meeting, but based on what you represented, I think it's fair to say the commission's position is remain the same.
Unchanged, understood, and I will carry that report forward. That's all that's on the agenda for the March 16th meeting, and then the next 2 items, which are an A and a B, but both are the zoning enforcement log. Because you'll see it appears like I was quite busy closing lots of things. Some of that was cleanup. So a concerted effort to try to make it a little more user-friendly or reader-friendly, so you know the activity there. And we unloaded quite a few. Some were actually closed with activity, but a lot were closed that shouldn't even have been there, so they're just sort of clogging it up. And to that same end, on the way to making a more reader-friendly report, because it's going to take a little design time, but I have descending dates from the current within each category of complaint or violation type. So you see the most current one within the subcategories first. So again, to see what's new and at least get a little idea as we're moving our way to a better report.
Okay. Commission members, any questions on the zoning enforcement law?
Thank you.
Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, my usual comment, page 4, basically 60 Prince Street, which is, basically the cemetery. A couple meetings ago, I asked Mrs. Hand if she, there is progress on, fixing this violation. And there was some memorandums between, the town engineer and Mrs. Hand, I guess, but it was in flux. And she was going to get me a copy, or the commission a copy of what was being done to fix, the violation. So hopefully we can get a copy of that memo to see where it stands. My understanding is it is being worked on. But then, it brought up a kind of procedural question in my mind. And I'll just throw it out here. This violation, they didn't conform to their site plan. And it's a fairly big fix. And, typically we don't get into reviewing, remediation of, zoning violations. But, in this case, and I don't want to really get into practice, but this might be an exception where, it was a fairly significant violation, and maybe that's, something the commission needs to, take a look at to make sure that, they're complying to the original plan that was submitted. So that was just kind of a question I had. I don't know if it's appropriate, but it just, in this particular instance, it, raised the question in my mind. So, thank you.
No, I appreciate those comments. I think your point is well taken, in that this is a situation that's gone on for a bit of time, and it's been a violation, and I think it should have. And again, I'm not questioning how people, anyone, but I think it's something that should have had a bit more attention, or more attention, and perhaps maybe a bit more direction from the commission also, as far as what action should be or should have been taken. Because I think you're very correct. This has been something that's been going on for a while.
Right, and I appreciate it. And, and basically, I know things take a long time, and as long as it's being addressed, that I think, is really my concern.
Well, I think it is. I happened to run into Mr. Baltramitis last week, I think it was, last week or the week before, and we talked a bit about this, and at least he had indicated to me that he was, putting together, that was on his radar. That was something that he knew needed to be addressed. And hopefully that's going to be addressed, and it's going to be addressed in a very near future. But if you would, Mrs. Torrey, if you would, follow up with Mr. Baltramitis, because again, I think he's the one that's, going to be acting on this, and to get a timeline, a timetable from him, as far as when this issue is going to be, fully addressed and fully resolved. Anyone else? Mr. Fitzsimmons.
I don't disagree with the comments of Commissioner Cohen and yourself. I guess the question I had is, and you would know, what other active violations of zoning does the town have? Is this the only open violation of a zoning the town of Wallingford is cited for?
Oh, that the town is cited
Town.
for? And if I may make a point, Mr. Chairman and members, other commissioners, this particular one that you raised too prior to now, first of all, the purview of the violations is somewhat blurred. And there was lengthy conversations in the office, both with Mrs. Hand and myself yesterday, and telephone conversations today. So it's come to the surface, but how much is documented? But how much is actual a zoning violation, and how much is of another matter or another purview is what we need to sort out. I'll be happy to get you anything on there. As far as the town being the violator, is that what? I don't know that there's any open with the town per se being a violator. And in this particular case, the violation that's listed on this file regarding Prince Street was more the site plan as opposed to, so It was the Prince Street building, not the Center Street Cemetery. There's where the blur it happened, so.
Well, yes, you're right, but, part of the problem is the entrance to and from the cemetery.
Which we can absolutely say that via the site plan, this is what you're allowed to do and nothing more.
Yeah, and there was a drainage.
Right.
issue.
And if Mr. Baltamitis and Mrs. Hand have had some conversation, I'm hoping there's some documentation of such, because that's where I come in rifling through to pick up their conversations, but I will certainly put what I can together for you.
Thank you. With that, if there's no any further comments, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, move we adjourn?
Have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Cohan, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, we're adjourned. Have a good evening.